Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. The God of Ice and Fire at Hogwarts. Chapter 1. Zilla. Zilla. The scorching flames licked every inch of his skin, and the red flames burned his torn wounds. Lin En's eyes were full of blood red. He pushed the child in his arms away from the fire with all his strength, and half knelt on the ground due to exhaustion. The devouring flames turned his skin black, and the constant pain left him with no strength to stand up. Lin's vision gradually became blurred, not only because of the distorted air under the high temperature, but also because of his gradual loss of consciousness. His world became dark and void, and the burning sensation brought by the fire gradually faded away. After an unknown amount of time, Lin En regained consciousness under a warm light. He opened his eyes and wanted to say something, but what came out was a baby's childish, beep, sound. This is rebirth. Lin raised his chubby hands, his little eyes full of doubts. Suddenly, Lin was picked up by a pair of slender hands with ugly wrinkles. Before he could see clearly the owner of these hands that did not look human at all, he was placed on the pillow of his mother in this life. His mother in this life was a beautiful woman with long blonde hair and black pupils. After she learned that her child was safely born, she fell asleep peacefully. Lin stared at the ceiling, as if it was difficult to accept what was happening in front of him. After a long time, a feeling of exhaustion came over. Lin En closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Time passes year by year, just like Merlin's stockings are changed one by one. As if in the blink of an eye, it has been 11 years since Lin was reborn into this world. 1990, England, Roll Manor. This is a magnificent medieval manor. In the center of the manor is an older-looking castle. However, although the appearance of the castle looks shabby and full of age, the decoration inside the castle keeps pace with the times. Enter, full of gorgeous atmosphere. In the window room on the second floor of the castle, Lin was standing in front of a full-length mirror with a gold edge. In the full-length mirror, there is a handsome boy with a slightly childish face, but a hint of maturity in his dark red eyes. The boy has black hair. If you look carefully, you can even find some traces of it in the boy's hair, dark red. This dark red hair color that looks like highlights is something Lin is born with, not something she acquires. In this world, Lin's name is Lin Roll, which is transliterated as Lin Roll. His surname is one of the 28 pure blood families. Yes, the world that Lin is in now is the magical world of Harry Potter, and when he was first born, the owner of those slender hands covered with embarrassing wrinkles was Gale, the house elf of Roll Manor. At this time, Lin finished adjusting his tie and looked away from the full-length mirror. Suddenly, a banging sound came from outside the window. It was an owl that kept knocking on the window, trying to come in. There was a letter in the owl's beak. Is it finally here? Lin En's eyes flashed with imperceptible joy. He quickly opened the window, let in the gray pom-pom-like owl, and took the letter from its mouth. The envelope was made of heavy parchment and the address was written in emerald green ink. Roll Manor. Room by the window on the second floor of the castle. Mr. Lin Roll. Sure enough, it is still the familiar formula. Seeing this extremely detailed address, the corners of Lin En's mouth curled up slightly. Lin turned over the envelope and saw a wax seal, a shield, and a capital H, surrounded by a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake. Lin, who had read Harry Potter twice in her previous life, was naturally very familiar with the Hogwarts school emblem. Although he could almost memorize the contents of the letter, Lin still took out the first piece of paper with a hint of nervousness and excitement. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster Albus Dumbledore. President of the International Confederation of Wizards, First-Class Grand Magician of the Order of Merlin, and Chief Magician of the Wizengamot. Dear Mr. Roll, we are pleased to inform you that you have been admitted to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Enclosed is a list of required books and equipment. Semester is scheduled to start on September 1st. We will be waiting for your owl to bring your reply before July 31st. Vice Principal, female. Sincerely, Minerva McGonagall. After reading the first piece of letter paper, Lin took out the second piece of letter paper underneath. The second piece of paper contained the uniforms, books, wands and other equipment that Lin would need to enroll in Hogwarts. After Lin wrote them down one by one, he put them back into the envelope along with the first piece of paper. Phew, Lin let out a sigh of relief. Although he had been prepared for what happened today, when the Hogwarts admission notice came to him, he still felt as if he had just woken up from a dream. What followed was excitement. Which Harry Potter fan didn't dream of receiving an admission letter to Hogwarts when they were teenagers? Snapped. Lynn carefully put the envelope into his pocket, then raised his hand and snapped his fingers. With the sound of an explosion, Gale, the house elf of Roar Manor, appeared in front of him. This is a house elf wearing a blue and white pillowcase. Although it looks very wrinkled and ugly, the brand new pillowcase and skin without any dirt make it look very clean. Master, your breakfast is ready. Madam is already dining downstairs. Gale saluted Lynn and said, I see. Lynn nodded slightly, and then went downstairs. There was a round table in the center of the hall on the first floor of the castle, and the blonde woman sitting at the round table was none other than Lynn's mother, Rowena Roll. Lynn's mother, Rowena Roll, is similar in pronunciation to Rowena Ravenclaw, the founder of Hogwarts Ravenclaw House, but there is no connection between the two. A graduate of Slytherin. Lynn finished his breakfast quickly, put down his knife and fork, and said, Mom, I just received a letter from the owl, and later I am going to ask Gale to take me to Diagon Alley to buy the books and equipment needed for school. Quote. Rowena nodded, and she said softly, Be safe. Rowena was not worried about whether Lynn would be in danger when he went to Diagon Alley. With the house elf Gale following him, even if Lynn went to Nocturne Alley, he probably wouldn't be in too much danger. After all, the magical ability of house elves exceeds that of most wizards. Otherwise, after Dobby was freed in the original book, he would not have been able to easily repel Lucius Malfoy. Lynn didn't say anything, just hugged his mother hard. Since his rebirth, he and Rowena have been dependent on each other. Apart from the house elf Gale, Rowena can be said to be the only person in the world that Lynn can trust. As for his father, Henry Roll, he was once a member of the Death Eaters, but 10 years ago Henry was killed by the suspicious Voldemort with a death curse because he concealed something from Voldemort. Die. And at that time, Rowena was just pregnant with him. If the fidelity curse hadn't been placed on Roll Manor and Voldemort couldn't discover it, even Rowena and Lynn, who was still in the womb, would have been brutally murdered. But what's strange is that even Rowena doesn't know who the secret keeper of the loyalty curse in Roll Manor is. Fortunately, Voldemort fell 1 year after Lynn was born, so Rowena no longer feared every day. After letting go of her mother, Lynn grabbed Gale's left hand. Gale raised his right hand and snapped his fingers, and with a bang, Lynn and Gale disappeared in place. The Leaky Cauldron, London. Lynn and Gale appeared at the door of the Leaky Cauldron, and Lynn looked around with some curiosity. Although Lynn N has left Roar Manor many times in the past 11 years, he has never been to the magical world. In order to protect himself, he has suppressed his curiosity and only stayed in the Muggle world. They can be seen everywhere in the castle. Refrigerators and other modern electronic equipment are the results of his efforts to use Muggle technology to transform the castle. In terms of daily life, I still have to admit that ordinary people know how to enjoy themselves much better than these old-fashioned wizards. Lynn's first impression of the Leaky Cauldron was that it was dirty. The lights in the Leaky Cauldron were very dim, and the tables and floor of the bar seemed to be covered with a layer of oil stains, which made people feel uncomfortable. Seems like a new face, young wizard, first time at the Leaky Cauldron. Old Tom, the owner of the Leaky Cauldron, happily wiped the cup in his hand with a rag and looked up at Lynn. He looked over Lynn and saw Gale, the house elf behind Lynn, and he knew it. It seems to be a young wizard from a pure-blood family. Yes, sir, I want to enter Diagon Alley, Lynn replied. Old Tom nodded, and he walked towards the back of the bar, not forgetting to continue wiping the dirty cup in his hand. Lynn followed him to a small courtyard surrounded by walls, and his eyes turned to the trash can placed alone by the wall. Remember, count 3 pieces up from here, then count 2 pieces down the horizontal, and finally hit it with your wand. Routinely, Old Tom tapped the end of his wand 3 times on the wall. I saw the bricks he knocked shaking rapidly. The bricks moved and formed a gradually larger hole in the middle. This hole eventually turned into a wide archway. Opposite the archway is a street paved with cobblestones, which is Diagon Alley, the most prosperous commercial street in the British wizarding world. Lynn stepped across the hole and turned around before the hole started to shrink and asked, By the way, why don't you use magic to clean the cup? I think the descaling spell should be able to achieve this purpose. Old Tom shook the dirty cup in his hand and laughed, but that's part of the fun in itself. It's like you can go directly into Diagon Alley, isn't it? As soon as Old Tom finished speaking, the ever-shrinking hole disappeared and turned into a wall again. Seeing this, Lynn couldn't help but laugh. Yes, just like he could have just asked the house elf Gale to take him to Apparition to Diagon Alley, but he had to experience the famous scene in person through the leaky cauldron. Walking on the streets of Diagon Alley, Lynn dug out the list again. Go to Gringotts to get the money first, and then go to Ollivander's wand shop. Lynn thought as he took out a rusty metal key from his pocket. There are many shops in Diagon Alley, and the one that attracts him most is naturally Ollivander's wand shop, which sells wands that can help him control magic and perform magic. Soon, Lin saw a snow-white building with a bronze door. On the bronze door, 3 large characters, Gringotts, could be seen. On both sides of the bronze door stood a goblin wearing a scarlet gold uniform. After seeing Gale behind Lin, these goblins recognized the identity of the little wizard of Lin's pure blood family. They flattered Lin. Welcome. In the eyes of these greedy goblins, gold galleons are everything, and pure blood families with a lot of wealth will naturally be treated as their guests. Lin adjusted his collar and stepped through the gate of Gringotts. When he was about to cross the second silver gate, a line of words engraved on the door appeared in front of him. Come in, stranger, but be careful. What will be the consequences of being greedy? Asking blindly and getting something for nothing will be punished the most severely. So if you want to take it from our underground vault, a wealth that never belonged to you, thief, you have been warned. Beware, what you summon is not treasure, but evil retribution. Quote. Seeing this sentence, Lin just laughed it off. Insatiable, this word is perfect to describe the goblin. In Lin's opinion, this sentence may be more reasonable to use as a warning to the goblin. Moreover, the only thing that can protect wealth is power. Only if you have enough power can you protect the things you want to protect. Otherwise, you can only sigh in despair while looking at everything that has been plundered. After entering Gringotts, Lin handed over the metal key, and then, led by an elf, he took a trolley along the railway track and headed underground. The trolley whizzed along, and the sharp cold wind blew across Lin's face. In the next second, another waterfall poured down on him, turning him into a drowned rat. The waterfall that showers Lin's body is called the anti-thief waterfall. It has the function of washing away all the magic spells and dispelling the disguise of magic. Of course, disguise methods such as human skin masks without any magical processing will not be discovered by anti-thief falls. The goblin who controlled the cart quickly snapped his fingers before Lin and Gale beside him got angry, and used a magic spell to dry the water off Lin's body. Not long after, a huge fire dragon appeared in their sight. The fire dragon sensed their arrival and tried to spray flames to attack them, but the goblin controlling the cart quickly took out a small metal instrument from his arms and shook it in the air. There was a loud and crisp, ding-dong, sound, and the fire dragon seemed to sense something particularly terrifying. It let out a hoarse roar, and then retreated continuously. Dear guest, this beast will have a conditioned reflex of something called a ding-dong piece. When it hears this sound, it will think of pain and retreat, not daring to attack us. The goblin explained to Lin. Lin nodded slightly to express his understanding. Soon, they arrived at the treasury controlled by the Roar family. The goblin pressed his palm on the treasury door, and the treasury door disappeared. At this time, the golden light seemed to blind Lin's eyes. Although Lin had some guesses about the property of the Roar family, Lin admitted that he was shocked after seeing the pile of gold galleons and the rare treasures everywhere. Lin took out a bag that had been casted with a traceless stretching spell and put thousands of gold galleons into it. Even so, the hill in the vault showed no tendency to decrease at all. It can be seen how huge this hill made of gold gallons is. After withdrawing the money, Lin and Gale returned to the ground smoothly and left Gringotts. After passing by Florin Fusco's ice cream shop and buying herself and Gale a cup of chocolate and nut ice cream, Lin came outside Ollivander's wand shop. This is a shop that looks small and shabby from the outside. The gold-lettered sign on the door has peeled off, and it reads, Ollivander's, making fine wands since 382 BC. In the shop window, there is a faded purple cushion with a magic wand on it. When Lin walked into Ollivander's wand shop, what he saw was thousands of long and narrow boxes that almost reached the ceiling. "Hello, are you Mr. Ollivander, the staff master?" Lynn asked an old man with light-colored eyes who appeared in front of them. Mr. Ollivander smiled and replied, "Oh, yes. Good afternoon, little wizard." Lynn nodded and said, "Hello, Mr. Ollivander, my name is Lynn Roll, and I'm here to buy a wand." Hearing Lynn's words, Mr. Ollivander was not surprised at all. He took out a long tape measure with silver scales from his pocket and started measuring Lynn. "Oh, of course, the little wizards who come to me all want to get a wand that suits them best. Now, Mr. Roll, come on, let me see. Which arm do you use to use the wand?" Mr. Ollivander said as he measured Lynn's size. Every Ollivander wand contains super powerful magical substances, which is also its essence, Mr. Ollivander said with a bit of pride in his tone. "We use unicorn hair, phoenix hair, etc. Tail feathers and the hard nerves of a fire dragon. Every Ollivander wand is unique, as no two magical creatures are exactly the same. Of course, this is never the case if you use a wand that belongs to another wizard. Great effect. Remember, Mr. Roll, it is the wand that chooses the wizard." Mr. Ollivander quickly measured the dimensions, and then walked through the shelves, selecting long boxes containing wands. "Ah, right, there are no useless wands, only useless wizards, right?" Lynn said casually, his eyes focused on an unfinished wand deep in the wand shop. To be honest, he was very curious about the making process of the wand. Hearing Lynn's words, Mr. Ollivander's eyes lit up. He grabbed a handful of long boxes he had just picked out, quickly came to Lynn, and grabbed Lynn's hands with his other hand. "You are so right, Mr. Roll, I didn't expect that you would have such a profound understanding of magic wands at such a young age," said Mr. Ollivander with great pleasure, evidently satisfied that his point of view was accepted. Seeing Mr. Ollivander's reaction, Lynn also touched his nose in embarrassment. In all conscience, he was just playing a joke. "Let's try this one. It's made from grapevine wood and has phoenix tail feathers. It's 11 inches long. It's pretty flexible. You can give it a try." Mr. Ollivander handed Lynn a wand. Lynn held the wand and waved it hard. I saw a beam of light burst out from the wand, violently bombarding a shelf not far away, and then exploded with a bang. A violent wave of air swept over, overturning several surrounding shelves, and the shelf that was hit exploded into a sky full of sawdust. Seeing this scene, Lynn couldn't help but his eyelids twitched. "Good guy, this power is comparable to the thunderbolt explosion used by an adult wizard, right?" "Oh no, definitely not this one." Mr. Ollivander grabbed the wand. He didn't seem to care about the broken shelves. Instead, he frowned and took out a dark wand from another long box. "Try it, ebony, unicorn hair, 8¼ inches," said Mr. Ollivander. As soon as Lynn held the wand, a cloud of magic power suddenly exploded from his palm, sending the wand flying several meters away. Mr. Ollivander hurriedly picked up the wand and put it back in the long box. "It's not this one either." Mr. Ollivander seemed to be less confident in his judgment. He went back to the shelves to select, and finally took down a long box wrapped in red silk. "Try this, mahogany, 13¼ inches, dragon's heartstrings. The material is a little brittle, you have to be careful." Mr. Ollivander carefully handed a wand that looked more delicate to Lynn. Lynn held the wand with a feeling of blessing to his soul. He subconsciously waved the wand in his hand. Aha! In an instant, endless flames soared from the ground. This red flame with a hint of gold enveloped the entire Ollivander's wand shop in an instant. The flames were reflected in Mr. Ollivander's horrified but frightened eyes. In his somewhat excited eyes. The flames in the sky seemed to burn the sky and boil the sea, shrouding Lynn, Gale and Mr. Ollivander in it, but surprisingly, this seemingly terrifying flame did not cause any substantial harm to them. The harm is at most that their skin feels a little hot. "Yes, this is it," Mr. Ollivander shouted with some excitement. At this moment, the flames all over the sky dissipated, and strange crimson lines quietly appeared on the body of this magic wand. The sharp-eyed Mr. Ollivander noticed this scene. He grabbed Lynn's hand holding the wand, looked at the wand and said with some surprise, "Wait, I seem to be a little blind. This is not an ordinary mahogany. The wand is a wand made from branches cut from magical trees after grafting mahogany and sycamore wood. Moreover, the sycamore wood grafted with mahogany is not the sycamore wood from the Muggle world, but a powerful tree from the Eastern magical world. The wood of strength. Sycamore wood has a very high affinity for flames. It's no wonder that this wand will release such a powerful flame when it recognizes you as its master. Mahogany grafted with sycamore wood, coupled with the dragon's heartstrings, Mr. Roar, I believe you will be able to have a very high achievement. Mr. Ollivander said happily. Dragon heartstrings often produce powerful wands capable of the most gorgeous magic, and owners of wands made from dragon heartstrings tend to learn faster than owners of other types of wands. Coupled with the legendary reputation of mahogany for bringing good luck to its owners, and the affinity of sycamore wood for flames, this has already determined that Lynn's talent will not be too bad. Of course, even if you think to the extreme that Lynn's magic talent is not much better, then at least in the aspect of fire magic, Lynn must have a unique talent. Otherwise, he could not be accepted by this sycamore wood from the east. 7 gold galleons. Sincerely, thank you. After choosing a wand for Lynn, Mr. Ollivander said to Lynn. Lynn motioned to Gale, who was holding the money bag, to pay. After purchasing the wand, Lynn took Gale to the Flourish and Blot's bookstore, Madame Malkin's robe store, Partridge's Cauldron and other stores in Diagon Alley to purchase items needed for admission. However, Lynn did not go to the magical animal store or the Ela Owl store to buy pets, because in his opinion, he did not have the need to keep a pet for the time being, and Lynn did not necessarily have to buy an owl of his own in terms of delivering letters. After all, at Roar Manor, Lynn could choose the more efficient house elf Gale to deliver messages, and at Hogwarts, Lynn could also go to the Ollery on the top floor of the West Tower and borrow Hogwarts' public owl to deliver messages. After buying all the equipment, Lynn asked Gale to take him to apparate back to Roar Manor. Mom, I'm back. The key is here for you. Lynn returns the key to Gringotts to Rowena. Rowena put away the keys and said to Lynn with a smile in her eyes, okay, go and organize your equipment. I know you can't wait. Lynn chuckled. As Rowena said, after purchasing these equipment, Lynn couldn't wait to go upstairs to sort them out. Lynn returned to his room on the second floor and took out a small black school bag with dark red lines from under a large desk. This school bag was also cast with a traceless expansion spell, and the space inside it was equivalent to 10 big suitcases. He took out the equipment he had purchased previously from the original bag one by one, and classified them into categories according to magic books, potion materials, crucibles and other magic props, protective gloves and other magic equipment, and robes and other clothing. The first thing Lynn put in front of him was a lot of magic potion materials. In addition to some necessary magic materials for school admission, Lynn also presciently purchased fire ash snake eggs, horseradish, sea onion bulbs, and thyme tincture, bird and snake eggshells, rue powder and other raw materials for making the elixir. Although Lin En is not yet able to make a blessing elixir, he is still certain that he will be able to learn how to make a blessing elixir in the future after experiencing the influence of chemical experiments in his previous life. Moreover, even if these materials are expensive, they are only a drop in the bucket for the Roar family. You know, many potions masters in the magic world were created by relying on countless gold galleons. After putting these potion materials into his school bag, Lin began to pack other magic props. In order to prevent accidents in the troubled Hogwarts, Lin purchased every magic prop and magic equipment according to the highest specifications, and bought an extra copy as a spare. In addition, Lin En also prepared some potions for daily use such as white fresh essence as a backup. After packing these up, it was the turn of the textbooks needed for class. Lin did not put them into her bag immediately, but placed them neatly on the bookshelf. Although he is not a magician like Hermione, Lin is still very willing to learn more magic before entering the magical world. After all, if you learn magic in advance, you can show it off in class. With this in mind, Lin pulled out Standard Spells, Elementary, from the bookshelf. Lin opened Standard Spells, Elementary, with one hand, and took out the wand from his waist with the other hand. Lumos, Lumos. Lin followed the spells and gestures in the book, waving her wand and reciting the luminous spell at the same time. The luminous spell can be said to be the simplest of all magics. It was only the first time Lin tried it and he saw a faint white light appear on the top of the wand. Although the light group seemed very weak, it could barely illuminate Lin's bedroom. Nox, Nox. Lin recited the spell again, causing the light cluster to go out. The first time he cast magic, even the most basic glowing spell, Lin felt an extremely wonderful experience. Is this magic? Lin N's eyes seemed to contain light. Wingardium Leviosa. Wingardium Leviosa. Lin waved his wand and pointed it at a quill in front of him. The quill jumped up under the control of magic power, shook in the air, and then fell back to where it was. Obviously, Lin's floating spell failed this time. However, Lin was not frustrated by this. After all, this was only his first time performing it. Lin continued to wave his wand and practiced using the levitation spell. Half an hour later, Lin N was barely able to stably control a book floating in the air 2 or 3 meters above the ground. This is still very different from the stick used by Ron to control the giant monster in the original work. Of course, this is not because Lin's talent is not as high as Ron's, but because magic is idealistic. The reason why Ron is able to cast a level of floating spell that even adult wizards may not be able to do is mainly because of his wish. It was strong enough, so strong that his floating spell performed a miracle for an instant. The afternoon passed quickly, and Lin was practicing several more basic spells in his bedroom that were familiar to him in his previous life. At this time, the standard spells, elementary, in Lin's hand turned to the page of the fire spell. Gale, help me tidy up the backyard, I need an open space to practice my spells. Lin snapped his fingers, summoned the house elf Gale, and then gave him instructions. Unlike life spells such as glowing spells and floating spells, Lin would never dare to practice offensive spells like fire spells in her bedroom. Otherwise, even if the castle casts protective magic, at least Lin's own bed would be burned to ashes. Lin didn't want to sleep on the floor at night. Okay, master. Gale bowed to Lin and disappeared. Through the window, Lin could see Gale operating in the backyard, working his magic to clear away some useless piles elsewhere. Since Roll Manor has not been open to the public for more than 10 years, most of the gardens outside the castle have been abandoned. Although Gale was willing to spend time every day taking care of the manor, Lin and Rowena agreed that this was not necessary, so Gale gave up. After Gale cleared a clearing, Lin came to the backyard. He pulled out the wand, and the feeling of blissful soul reappeared. He waved the wand subconsciously and chanted the incantation, "Fire is raging. Incendio." There was almost no stagnation, and a large ball of red flames spurted out from the wand with his mind, turning into a raging fire and burning in the backyard. The temperature of this flame is extremely high, making the surrounding air appear somewhat distorted. Seeing this, Lin was a little shocked. The power of this fire spell is probably comparable to the fire spell cast by an adult wizard. Seeing that the fire continued to expand and had begun to spread towards the backyard fence, Lin waved his wand at a loss, trying to put back the flames. But he seemed to have forgotten that the fire spell could only release flames, but had no function of withdrawing them. But at this moment, a strange scene appeared. The flames that almost spread to the entire backyard slowly shrank toward the center under Lin's strong desire to take them back, and finally dissipated in the air. This, Lin N was a little unbelievable. The moment he withdrew the flame, he felt as if the flame was part of his body and could be wielded like an arm. Flaming. Incendio. Lin N recited the spell again without belief and summoned a large ball of flame. This time, Lin did not let the flames spread, but tried to control them, just like he had just controlled them to dissipate. Lin waved the wand in his hand, and he was surprised to find that the flame that had just been released moved with the wave of his wand. Whichever direction his wand pointed, the flame would spread in that direction. Is it because of the power of this mahogany-grafted sycamore wand? Lin looked at the wand in his hand carefully. He found that when he was controlling the flame, the red lines on the wand's body became more vivid. Lin's speed and control over the fire spell are unmatched by any other spell. Even a successful glowing spell cast at the beginning is not as powerful as a fire spell that can directly rival an adult wizard. This extremely strong control over flames may come from the flame affinity of the sycamore wood, or it may come from Lin himself. After all, if Lin could be chosen by this mahogany-grafted sycamore wand, his own flame affinity would probably not be much lower. Of course, this will have to wait until Lin learns to cast spells without a wand in the future and casts a fire spell after getting rid of the wand. Lin En continued to practice the flame curse, and as time went by, he gradually became able to perceive the flow of magic power in his body when casting spells, which was an experience he couldn't have when casting other spells. 3 days passed quickly. Lin learned many common spell casting methods from standard spells, elementary, and the most obvious improvement was naturally his fire spell. At this time, Lin appeared in the backyard again. Unlike before, he planned to try the silent spell of the fire spell. After these 3 days of practice, Lin En has firmly remembered the flow trajectory of the magic power in his body when he cast the flame spell, which allowed him to try to control the movement of the magic power according to the previous flow trajectory without chanting the spell chants. Lin En felt the not too powerful magic power in his body, and slowly controlled it to flow towards the wand according to the flow path when he cast the fire spell. This was a very slow process, but when Lin tried to recite the flame curse silently in his heart, he was surprised to find that the process had been shortened by nearly 100 times. Lin En obviously just thought of the incantation of the fire curse in his heart, but didn't say it out, but the flame spewed out from his wand very smoothly, and burned rapidly in the backyard. Silent casting. Success. Lin En felt very happy in her heart. Although the power of the blazing flames cast by the silent spell is slightly less powerful than before, it still reaches the level of OWLs. Red flames were burning in the backyard, and Lin could feel a wave of heat hitting his face just by getting slightly closer. This flame doesn't seem to be able to hurt me. While staring at the flame, such an idea suddenly appeared in Lin's mind. Lin tried to reach out and touch the burning flames in the yard. A burning sensation came instantly, but that was all. The blazing flames could not cause Lin any greater harm. This is not the effect of the fire spell. Although the fire spell summons magical flames, it does not distinguish between friend and foe, and can burn everything around it unscrupulously. However, when it faced Lin En, it seemed to have seen its master and became obedient. There was even a small ball of flame that clung to Lin En's palm and danced slightly on his fingertips. Lin was a little surprised by this. You must know that magic that can prevent flames from harming oneself is not uncommon. The first-generation Dark Lord Grindelwald's fire shield can even use the fire for himself, but the fire shield is a combination of the fire spell and the iron armor. The fusion of the spell itself has defensive magical capabilities, but the fire spell released by Lin is just an ordinary magical flame. Moreover, this flame just has no effect on Lin. When faced with other flammable objects, it will still turn into an all-devouring demon. So it's my problem. Lin was in doubt. Lin En is not the kind of reckless man who is blindly confident and wants to find out the truth alone even when he knows nothing, ultimately putting himself and the people around him in a desperate situation. When he encounters a problem that he doesn't understand, he naturally has to ask someone with a higher level of magic for help. So, after extinguishing the fire in the backyard, Lin returned to the castle and found her mother, Rowena. After learning about Lin's condition, Rowena pondered for a while and took out a beautiful willow wand from her arms. She raised her hand and waved, performing a beautiful silent spell, and a ball of flame suddenly appeared between the two of them. Rowena's control of the flame was also extremely good. The flame burned in the air without any tendency to spread. Try it. Will this flame hurt you? Rowena controlled the flames and moved towards Lin and said. Lin reached out and touched the flame, shook his head and said, same as my fire spell, it can make me feel the burning sensation, but it can't really hurt me. Rowena nodded slightly and waved her wand again to extinguish the flames. Rowena looked at Lin's dark red hair thoughtfully and said, since my flames can't hurt you, it means it's not a problem with the flames, but with your own physique. It's just that my flames can't hurt you. However, it is unknown whether the root of the problem comes from your bloodline or from other magical powers. But as far as I know, neither the Luoer family nor my former family has such a precedent. Of course, there may be atavistic inheritance, and the predecessors with this power have not been recorded in the family history, possible. At least, for now, this kind of power is good for you, isn't it? In the wizarding world, it's not uncommon for little wizards with some magical abilities. Rowena smiled softly and said softly. Hearing this, Lin En nodded slightly. As Rowena said, it is not uncommon for wizards with special abilities in the magical world, such as the prophecy talent passed down from generation to generation by the Trelawney family, or the charm ability inherent in the hybrid Vila. Yes, my extremely strong flame affinity allowed me to control the silent casting of the fire spell in just 3 days, and it also prevented the fire from harming me. Lin no longer struggles with the source of her talent. The extremely strong affinity for flames allows him to easily possess far superior attainments in flame magic, and what he has to do is to give full play to his talents as much as possible, so that his special talents can be displayed. Time passed as quickly as Merlin took off his stockings. In the blink of an eye, a month passed. On this day, Lin carried his little black school bag on his back, and after bidding farewell to his mother Rowena, he asked Gale to apparate and take him to King's Cross Station. The sound of gas explosions sounded, and Lin and Gale appeared in an uninhabited corner of King's Cross Station. Lin En stepped out of the pillar that covered her figure and saw the crowds of people coming and going around her. In order to avoid being discovered by Muggles, Gale hid his figure as soon as he arrived here. After bidding farewell to Gale softly, Lin walked towards platform 9 in his memory with his school bag on his back and his ticket in hand. Not far away, many boys or girls pushing small carts accompanied by their parents are hitting the partition wall between platforms 9 and 10 one by one. Most of these children have one thing in common, that is, there is often a cage containing an owl on the trolley. Standing on the side of this partition was an adult man, and Lin could vaguely see a wand stuck on his waist. Obviously, this adult man is the wizard responsible for maintaining order here, and this area has been cast with an obvious confusion spell. The little wizards passed through the wall one by one, and some of the Muggle-born first-year freshmen even ran with an aura of death when they pushed the cart through the partition. This made Lin look at him frequently. Since all the luggage was stuffed into the school bag that had been casted with the traceless stretching charm, Lin looked relaxed and content when walking through the partition wall. Arriving at the other side of platform 9, Lin saw a dark red retro steam locomotive parked next to a platform packed with little wizards. The sign hanging on the train read, Hogwarts Express, 11 o'clock. Looking at this line of text and recalling the speed of the train in the original work, Lin couldn't help but chuckle. It is indeed the Hogwarts Express train. With this in mind, Lin boarded the train and walked straight to a box near the end of the train. Lin sat down against the window and took out an old-looking notebook from his bag. This is Rowena's notes about fire magic when she was still studying at Hogwarts. This notebook with withered pages was a treasure in Lin's eyes. By learning from his mother's experience, he was able to cast the spell silently and let the flames freely circulate in the air without any combustibles. Burn and be able to freely control the size and shape of the flame. Excuse me, is there any room in this box? At this moment, a hearty voice came from the door of the box. I saw 2 red-haired boys walking in from the door of the box. The 2 red-haired boys looked almost identical. They were obviously twin brothers. The wizard robes they put on had the emblem of Gryffindor House on the chest. The moment he saw the 2 of them, Lin En already knew their identities. George Weasley and Fred Weasley. Ginger, Gemini, Gryffindor. These identifiable features make the identities of the 2 people clear at a glance. There are all empty seats here, sit wherever you want. Lin En closed the note in his hand and said to the 2 of them. Fred thanked him, and then, together with George, pushed the suitcase containing the luggage towards the corner of the box. Wingardium Leviosa. Wingardium Leviosa. Seeing that their faces were flushed, Lin took out his wand from his pocket, and kindly helped them move the suitcase to the corner of the box with a floating spell. Seeing this scene, Fred and George were both stunned. Thank you, buddy, if it weren't for you, we would have forgotten that we are wizards. George smiled and said to Lin, he took out his wand and gave his dusty robe a clean up. Fred also used a cleansing charm on himself, and the 2 sat down across from Lin. Fred Weasley, nice to meet you. George Weasley, nice to meet you. The Weasley twins reached out to Lin at the same time and said. Lin En held the hands of the 2 and said with a smile, Lin Roll, nice to meet you. Hearing this, the 2 were stunned for a moment, and then showed a relieved expression. Just listen to George say, I was thinking just now that you are obviously a freshman who has not yet entered school, but you can use the floating spell so skillfully. I didn't expect that you are the little wizard of the Roar family. Under normal circumstances, young wizards from pure blood families tend to be exposed to magic earlier than their peers, so George thought that Lin had been learning magic for a long time. Lin shook his head with a smile, and didn't tell the other party the fact that he had only been exposed to magic for 2 months. Lin cast his eyes on the Gryffindor badges on their chests and said, "You are all students of Gryffindor House, right? I don't know which house I will enter then." Fred said, "Yes, we're both Gryffindor second years." At this time, George glanced at the notebook in Lin's hand and said thoughtfully, "As far as I know, everyone in the Roll family is a Slytherin graduate, and there is a high probability that people with the blood of the Roll family will go to Slytherin House, but if it's you, Roar, it's likely to go to Ravenclaw House." Fred nodded and said, "Yes, most studious little wizards like you will go to Ravenclaw." Hearing this, Lin glanced at the unclosed note in his hand, and laughed dumbly. "Lin, you can just call me Lin," Lin said kindly. Hearing the meaning of making friends in Lin's words, Fred and George looked at each other and said to Lin in unison, "Lin, just call us by our names." Just as the three of them were about to continue their conversation, the door of the box was pushed open again. A fat woman with a nice smile and dimples walked in pushing a cart of snacks. "Honey, do you want to buy some food from the cart?" Lin looked at the cart. A large number of magical foods were loaded on the cart, including BB's multi-flavor beans, Shuibao super bubble gum, chocolate frogs, crucible-shaped cakes, licorice wands and other snacks. Even if it was a relatively niche pile of cockroaches, Lin could still see a few boxes. However, Lin really couldn't appreciate the cockroaches that were still crawling in the box. Perhaps only a certain old bee would have a soft spot for a weird dessert-like cockroach pile. Facing the cart of food, the Weasley twins fell silent. In this timeline they haven't made much money from inventing magical products, so they're a bit cash-strapped. "Here are 3 chocolate frogs." Fred hesitated again and again, then counted out some copper nuts one by one from his pocket and handed them to the fat woman. If it was just the two of them in the box, Fred would choose to spend the time on a sandwich prepared by Mrs. Weasley. But they met new friends, and Fred still hoped to entertain each other with food from the wizarding world. "Except for the pile of cockroaches, take 3 portions of each of the other snacks." Lin saw the predicament of the Weasley twins, and the behavior of the two moved him even more, so he generously grabbed a handful of galleons from the purse that had cast the untraceable stretching charm, and planned to use them as a gift next year. Become a nouveau riche like Harry Potter. The fat woman gave Lin a surprised look, then took 3 portions of each snack except the pile of cockroaches and handed them to Lin, and took another 3 chocolate frogs for the Weasley twins. "Let's eat together. I can't finish all this much." After watching the fat woman leave the box, Lin smiled and said to the Weasley twins. Fred and George looked at each other. Fred took a sizzling bee candy from the pile of snacks, put it in his mouth, and kept chewing while saying, "Hiss, it's so sweet. I bet Professor Dumbledore will like this." George handed one of their chocolate frogs to Lin. Lin was not polite, tore open the package, pinched the hind legs of the chocolate frog that was trying to escape with one hand, and threw it into his mouth. After finishing the chocolate frog, Lin took out another card from the package. On the card was a man with light blue eyes and short black hair. The man's lens refracted 2 white lights, making him look very serious, but his deep eyes were somewhat gloomy. Lin turned over the card and looked at the text on the back. Wallison Green, a famous French alchemist and a direct disciple of the great alchemist Nicolas Flamel. Mr. Green's widely recognized contributions include: in 1945, he participated in the capture of the dark wizard Grindelwald. Invented the alchemy product Charmanite. He made a breakthrough in alchemy with his teacher Nico Flamel. After reading this passage, Lin's eyes froze. This Mr. Wallison Green is a character outside the original work, and his participation in the capture of the dark wizard Grindelwald does not match Lin's knowledge of the original work. Of course, the magical world is a complete world, not just a novel can get a glimpse of the whole picture, and it is not surprising that there are some powerful wizards in the magical world that are not recorded in the book. However, Lin was afraid of the alchemical product, Forbidden Magic Stone, invented by Wallison Green. At this time, Fred and George also tore open the packaging of their own chocolate frogs, wailing that their cards were all Dumbledore. After seeing the card in Lin's hand, George said with interest, "Mr. Wallison Green. This card is a relatively rare one. Lin, you are lucky." Seeing the two of them looking at him, Lin asked directly, "Do you know Mr. Green? I want to know what kind of item is the alchemy product, Forbidden Stone, among his contributions." Looking at Lynn's nervous look, the Weasley twins burst into laughter. After a while, Fred stroked his chest and explained to Lynn, who had a question mark on his face. The alchemy product, Sorcerer's Stone, invented by Mr. Wallace in Green has a certain ability to suppress magical power. After he launched the alchemical products, they were once sought after by the Ministry of Magic in various countries and were used to protect important places in the Ministry of Magic, such as the Department of Mysteries of our British Ministry of Magic. However, the ability of the Forbidden Magic Stone to suppress magical power is not as powerful as imagined. A quaffle-sized Forbidden Magic Stone can only reduce the ability of wizards to cast magic within 10 meters by less than 10%. For a powerful devil-level wizard like Professor Dumbledore has no effect at all. After getting the explanation, Lynn suddenly realized. Yes, if the so-called Forbidden Demon Stone is too powerful, I'm afraid it won't be pursued by the Ministry of Magic of various countries but banned. At this time, George smiled and said to Lynn, "You have also seen the power of alchemical products. These are all attributed to alchemy. Those shorthand quills commonly used by reporters, the dung bombs in Zuko's joke shop, they are all magical products made through alchemy." Lynn nodded slightly. He had some impression of these things. He remembered that the Weasley twins seemed to have opened a Weasley Wizard Wheez's shop later. Fred said with some distress, "We have wanted to learn alchemy for a long time, but alchemy is an elective course that can only be taken by 6th graders and 7th graders, and ancient runes can only be taken by 3rd graders. Elective." George sang along on the side and said, "So we used a jar of sizzling bees to borrow A Simple Introduction to Ancient Magic Texts, Magic Text Dictionary, and Magic Word Phonetic Chart from the 6th grade Ravenclaw Senior, planning to study on our own in advance. Ancient runes, and then learn alchemy." Fred said. "George and I have both thought about it. After learning these magic words, we must first improve the dung bomb and give Filch a little shock. Oh, by the way, Filch is Hogwarts administrator." Lynn didn't expect that the Weasley twins would start getting into alchemy so early. But this is not surprising. After all, the Weasley twins were already able to improve dung bombs when Harry Potter entered school, and they were only in their 3rd year at that time. After the introduction of the Weasley twins, Lynn found that he was also interested in alchemy. So, Lynn asked, "Can I also read the books you borrowed? I also want to get in touch with ancient runes in advance." The Weasley twins agreed without hesitation. Fred went to the corner of the box and found 3 worn-out magic books from the luggage all over the place. These were exactly what George had said earlier: A Simple Introduction to Ancient Runes, Dictionaries of Runes, and Sounds of Magic Words, Surface. Lynn took the magic book from him, and as a thank you, Lynn also lent the 2 of them the notebook that recorded his mother's understanding of the flame curse. "This is my mother's understanding of the fire curse when she was studying at Hogwarts," Lynn explained to the Weasley twins. Fred took the notebook and joked, "Lynn, with the help of this notebook, your fire curse should be quite powerful, right?" Lynn nodded, took out his wand from his bosom and waved it lightly. With a beautiful silent casting, a spherical flame appeared among them out of thin air, bouncing up and down. Feeling the heat, both of them twitched their mouths. Fred never imagined that Lynn's fire curse was so powerful. In all goodness, he was just joking. Silent casting, this is silent casting. I'm afraid that even adult wizards who graduated from Hogwarts are rarely able to cast spells silently. Fred and George shouted wildly in their hearts. "It's just a fire spell. I cast other spells just like you." Lynn shook his head and said. Fred and George just nodded without asking. Talents like this for a specific magical power often come from blood, and this involves personal privacy. Fred and George have no idea of exploring other people's privacy. Soon, the long journey was spent by the 3 of them studying. As the sun set, the train also slowed down. "The train will arrive at Hogwarts in 5 minutes. Please leave your luggage on the train and we will take you to school." The voice of the radio echoed in the box. The Weasley twins immediately closed their notebooks on the table and each took out their wands from their arms. "The wizard's robe is coming. The wizard's robe is coming." The 2 of them cast the flying spell at the same time, summoning their wizard robes from the pile of luggage in the corner of the box. As soon as the Weasley twins turned around, the wizard's robes were put on them. Lynn also closed the A Simple Introduction to Ancient Magic Texts, in his hand, took out the wizard's robe from his backpack, and used the floating spell to control it and put it on himself. Lynn, is your backpack cast with the traceless stretching charm? Only then did Fred realize that Lynn had no other luggage except the backpack in his hand, so he asked curiously. Lynn nodded. At this time, the train stopped, and the little wizards rushed towards the door. The Weasley twins also pulled Lynn and squeezed towards the car door. Soon, the three of them left the train and descended to a dark and small platform. The cold air that hit their faces made the Weasley twins shiver. Not far away, a lamp was switching over the heads of the little wizards, and a tall figure shouted loudly, "First-year students! First-year students, come over here!" This was a tall man with a full beard and a moleskin coat. His unusual figure made him stand out among the young wizards. Yes, this tall gentleman is Rubeus Hagrid, the gamekeeper of Hogwarts. Go, see you in the castle auditorium later. Fred patted Lynn on the shoulder and said with a smile. Lynn said goodbye to the Weasley twins and headed in the direction of Hagrid. I am Rubeus Hagrid, keykeeper and gamekeeper of Hogwarts. Follow along, said Hagrid in his gruff voice. The little wizards followed Hagrid down a steep and narrow path. It was dark all around, and the stars in the sky were not enough to illuminate the road here. Upon seeing this, Lynn gently waved his wand, and a small ball of flame rose out of thin air amidst the exclamations of all the young wizards. It hung steadily in the air and illuminated the path forward for the young wizards. Hagrid, who was holding a dim oil lamp, was stunned for a moment, then praised, "Beautiful fire spell. Little wizard, what is your name?" Lynn saluted Hagrid gracefully and said, "Lynn Roar, Mr. Hagrid." Hagrid patted Lynn's shoulder hard to encourage him. The terrifying force made Lynn almost fall over. Since Hagrid was far away from Lynn just now, he just thought that Lynn's voice of chanting the spell was relatively quiet. He didn't know that Lynn was casting the spell silently, otherwise he would never be so calm. At the end of this narrow path, there is a black lake. On the hillside on the other side of the lake stands a majestic and ancient castle. There are many spears on the castle, and the windows are shining in the faint starlight. There are rows of boats moored on the shore of the lake. These boats are used to welcome new students. There can be no more than 4 people in each boat. Hagrid pointed at the boats and shouted to the little wizards. Hearing this, the little wizards immediately crowded towards the boat. Lynn stood there and waited until all the other little wizards got on the boat. Then he extinguished the flames in the sky and took a boat with Hagrid, who was also last. The boat rowed across the mirror-like lake and headed towards the majestic castle. When the front boat approached a cliff, Hagrid shouted, "Lower your head." In fact, except for Hagrid himself, no one else would touch the cliff even if they didn't lower their heads. Soon, a group of young wizards arrived at the castle, and Lynn also returned to the ranks of these first-year students. Hagrid stepped forward and knocked 3 times with his huge fist on the castle's oak door. The door was opened, and a witch wearing emerald green robes stood at the door with a serious face. "The first years are all here, Professor McGonagall," Hagrid said. "Thank you, Hagrid." Professor McGonagall nodded and opened the door completely to let the little wizards in. Professor McGonagall led the little wizards along the stone-paved floor of the castle, and finally came to an empty room. "Welcome to Hogwarts," Professor McGonagall said. "The opening banquet is about to begin, but before you take your seats in the auditorium, you need to confirm which house you will enter. Sorting is a very important task. An important ceremony, because while you are at school, the house is like your home at Hogwarts. You will attend classes with other students in the house, stay in the house dormitories together, and spend time together in the house common room. Spare time. The names of the 4 houses are Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw and Slytherin. Each house has its own glorious history and has cultivated outstanding wizards. You are in Hog during your time at Watts. Your outstanding performance will earn your house extra points, while any violations will cause your house to lose points. At the end of the year, the house with the highest score will win the House Cup, which is very high honor. I hope that no matter which college you are assigned to, you can bring glory to the college." After giving the welcome speech, Professor McGonagall led everyone through the foyer and then through a double door to the auditorium. Arrive at the highest city in the world, Lightang Auditorium. Lin En thought silently in his mind as he came to the end of the line. At this time, young wizards from all grades in the 4 major colleges were sitting around 4 long tables. Thousands of candles were floating above the tables, and stars were twinkling on the velvety black ceiling. It makes the entire auditorium more beautiful and magnificent. Professor McGonagall took a few steps forward and placed a pointed wizard's hat on a 4-legged stool. The hat was patched and worn, and as dirty as if it had just been picked out of a trash heap. This hat is naturally the sorting hat that determines the belonging of every little wizard. I saw the sorting hat twisting in the auditorium as if no one was watching, and the big gap like a big mouth made an unpleasant singing sound. The sorting ceremony has begun. After the singing ended, Professor McGonagall came forward holding a roll of parchment with the names of all the new students on it. Whoever's name I call now will wear the sorting hat, Professor McGonagall shouted. Faye Aisha. A little girl ran out of the queue and sat obediently on the 4-corner stool. Professor McGonagall placed the sorting hat on her head. After a few seconds, the sorting hat shouted, Ravenclaw. The little girl named Faye Aisha immediately stood up nervously, and then, under the nod of Professor McGonagall, she stumbled towards the second table on the left where everyone clapped and applauded her, which belonged to Raven Long Table at Crow College. After Faye Aisha took her seat, Professor McGonagall read out the name of the next little wizard. In this way, the sorting ceremony went on in an orderly manner. Since the initial letter of Lynn's surname, Roar, is R, which is later in the alphabet, it took nearly 20 minutes before Professor McGonagall called his name. Lynn Roar. Professor McGonagall spoke loudly. Lynn came forward, sat on the 4-corner stool, and let the sorting hat be placed on his head. Closing his eyes, Lynn could hear a subtle voice ringing in his ears. Difficult, very difficult. I can see that you have great courage, which is beyond the courage of most Gryffindors, and you are very talented. Listening to the sorting hat's words, Lynn was not surprised. After all, if he didn't have the courage, how could he die in a fire just to save a child he didn't know? However, according to the sorting hat's wishes, does he want to arrange himself into Gryffindor? You know, apart from the Weasley family, the only pure-blood family member assigned to Gryffindor is Sirius Black. However, I can also see that you are loyal enough that you will not betray any friends. And when it comes to love, you may be loyal. The sorting hat continued. This time it was talking about the Hufflepuff qualities that Lynn possessed. When hearing the sorting hat's comments about her love, Lynn couldn't help but blush and feel embarrassed. Come on, I have been a single person for 2 lives, why is the sorting hat so sure of him about love? I can also see that you seem to have great wisdom. Whether it is learning ability or thinking ability, you are far superior to most Ravenclaws. However, this is not your innate ability, but the accumulated experience. This time the sorting hat talked about Lynn's Ravenclaw qualities. After hearing what the sorting hat said, Lynn couldn't help but snicker in his heart. Having experienced 16 years of exam-oriented education, his learning ability and other aspects were naturally not comparable to those of these young British wizards who were popular in their bad habits. Even Ravenclaw, who has a strong academic atmosphere, may not be as good at writing papers as he was in his previous life. However, although the sorting hat could tell him about the characteristics of Ravenclaw, he was sure that the sorting hat would not actually assign him to Ravenclaw. After all, compared with the qualities he possesses from other colleges, it is just an acquired talent, which is probably not surprising. At the end, I can see your huge ambition. Maybe you disdain power, but your desire for power and victory surpasses all the little wizards I have seen today. You will not be rigid. Due to worldly constraints, in order to achieve your goals, you may do whatever it takes. The words spoken by the sorting hat silenced Lynn. Yes, as the sorting hat said, his thirst for victory is indelible. Born in a mountainous area in his previous life, he has always had the desire to get out of the mountains and stand out. He will give up everything he owns for an opportunity. He will also be eliminated because his teacher helped his relatives through the back door, and he will come to the door at night to kill them. Beaten until hospitalized. I am afraid that only those born in the quagmire will have the most genuine desire for victory. In this life, Lin En was born in the Roar family, one of the 28 holy pure blood families, but the desire deep in his bones would not be wiped out by a simple reincarnation. Interesting, really interesting. You are the most difficult little wizard I have encountered in the past 10 years. You are brave, kind, but unscrupulous, and have the ultimate desire. You are loyal, and have the ultimate desire. With your smart mind and calm thinking, you are like a collection of contradictions. Where should I assign you? You have almost every characteristic of the Academy, and you are no weaker than ordinary people. It is difficult for me to assign you. Assign to one of the colleges and ignore the other 3 colleges. The Sorting Hat swayed unsteadily. It had never seen such a strange little wizard. Slytherin, Lynn said hoarsely. Every characteristic described by the Sorting Hat as a reflection of his previous life, as if he had repeated that short life again in just 2.5 minutes. But whether it was his bravery when he jumped into the fire, his perseverance during his studies, and his sincerity in dealing with friends, they were all just a moment in his short life. Only the desire for victory that was in line with Slytherin's characteristics was something that ran through his life. Do you want to go to Slytherin? Okay. After all, you are also a member of the Roll family. Since this is your ambition, then I will follow your wishes. Maybe it's because Lynn's Slytherin traits are indeed more obvious, maybe it's because Lynn comes from a pure-blood family, or maybe it's really difficult for the Sorting Hat to sort out his house. After learning about Lynn's thoughts, the Sorting Hat didn't hesitantly agreed to his request. Slytherin, shouted the Sorting Hat. Opening his eyes, Lynn heard thunderous applause from the Slytherin table, and also saw some surprised looks from everyone. When Lynn sat down at the long Slytherin table, a freshman next to him who was sorted into Slytherin before Lynn immediately came over. Awesome, Roll. The Sorting Hat actually passed a full 2.5 minutes. It's really rare that your academy was just sorted out. Oh, by the way, my name is Erwin Foley, nice to meet you. Lynn nodded and said, Lynn Roar, nice to meet you. After saying that, Lynn had no intention of continuing the conversation and turned his attention to the teacher's desk. Those sitting at the teacher's desk were all familiar faces from Lynn N's previous life, except for the professor of defense against the dark arts. That's Mr. Wallison Green. Lynn's pupils dilated slightly. He didn't expect that Mr. Green's chocolate frog card had just been issued on the train, and now he would see Mr. Green himself. At this time, Lynn saw the Weasley twins out of the corner of his eye. It was obvious that the Weasley twins were surprised that this year's defense against the dark arts professor was Mr. Green. There seemed to be a little excitement in their eyes. Could it be that the reason why the Weasley twins became so high in alchemy was because they learned alchemy from Mr. Wallison Green this year? Lynn's expression changed slightly. In this case, can I also learn alchemy from this famous French alchemist? You know, the magic stone that can extend the life of Nico Flamel and his wife for more than 600 years is also an alchemical product. Although Lynn was not interested in extending lifespan, he was fascinated by the power of alchemy. After all, the Philosopher's Stone is alchemy, but alchemy is not the Philosopher's Stone. At this time, Mr. Green, Professor Green seemed to have caught Lynn's gaze. He nodded slightly towards Lynn and showed a kind smile. Seeing this scene, Lynn couldn't help but glance at the zombie-faced Professor Snape next to Professor Green. They are all gloomy men, so why are there such big differences between them? Lynn thought so. Soon, the sorting ceremony ended. The principal of Hogwarts, Albus Dumbledore, stood up. He looked at the little wizards with a smile on his face, stretched out his arms, and said very happily, Welcome. Welcome everyone to start a new life at Hogwarts. School year. Before the banquet begins, I want to say a few words. That is, idiot, crying nose, residue, screw it. Thank you all. As Professor Dumbledore finished speaking, the auditorium burst into applause. Not a word of nonsense. Lynn N was suddenly moved. This reminded him of the high school graduation ceremony in his previous life. The principal had to shake hands with each student to hand out leather cases for diplomas. Thousands of people took turns to hand them out, leaving Lynn N to wait in the audience. More than 3 hours. At this time, the plate in front of Lynn was suddenly filled with food. Beef, roast chicken, pork chops, lamb chops, sausages, steaks, boiled potatoes, baked potatoes, potato chips, Yorkshire pudding, pea shoots, carrots, gravy, ketchup, and perhaps because of a certain old bee, there were candies such as mint candies on the plate. Just when Lynn N was about to start, the ghosts from various colleges suddenly emerged. Next to the Slytherin table was a very scary-looking ghost with glazed eyes, a haggard appearance, and silver blood spots on his robes. This was none other than Slytherin's school ghost, Bloody Barrow. Good guy, is this still enough for people to eat? Lin was a little helpless. Standing at the dining table covered in blood, it was really hard to eat. Lin tried his best to ignore Bloody Barrow, and then tried the steak and baked potatoes on the dinner plate, which tasted surprisingly good. When the little wizards were full, the food on the plates was replaced by some desserts. There are a wide variety of desserts including ice cream, apple pie, syrup fruit tarts, chocolate sponge cake, fried jam donuts, wine-soaked jam pudding, strawberries, jelly and rice pudding. Lin took 2 cups of ice cream and ate them. Finally, the plates became clean again, and the auditorium returned to its original silence from the noise during the meal. Oh, now that everyone has eaten and drunk, I want to say a few more words to everyone. At the beginning of the semester, I want to put forward a few things to pay attention to. First-year students, please pay attention. No students are allowed to enter the forest area. Students in other grades should also remember this. Professor Dumbledore's shining eyes glanced at the Weasley twins. Apparently, they had run to the Forbidden Forest a lot in their first year. Furthermore, the administrator, Mr. Filch, also asked me to remind everyone not to cast magic in the corridors between classes. Finally, the review of Quidditch players will be held in the second week of this semester. Anyone who is interested in joining the college varsity team, students, please contact Ms. Huochi. Now, before everyone goes to bed, let's sing the school song together. Professor Dumbledore said loudly, showing a smile. But Lin found that all the professors except Professor Dumbledore's smiles froze after hearing this sentence. Professor Dumbledore waved his wand, and a long golden ribbon twisted like a snake to form lines of golden text. These words were the school song of Hogwarts. Everyone chooses a tune he likes. Professor Dumbledore said, "Get ready and sing." Under the leadership of Professor Dumbledore, a group of young wizards sang quickly. Some first-year students were a little shy at first, but they soon became involved. Hogwarts, 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 Hogwarts. Please teach us knowledge. Whether we are a bald old man or a child who hurts his knee, our minds can accommodate some interesting things. Because now our brains are empty, full of air, dead flies and trivial matters. Teach us some valuable knowledge. Give us back what we have forgotten. Just do your best and leave the rest to us. We will study hard until we turn to dust. Quote. Everyone sang to a different tune, which put the whole auditorium in a state of chaos. No wonder the other professors looked so helpless. Among them, the Weasley twins sang to the melody of the funeral march, while Lin sang in a strange singing, dancing and rapping form, which made Professor Dumbledore feel a little anxious. Music, said Professor Dumbledore with tears in his eyes after the song was over, more glamorous than anything we've done here. It's bedtime now, everyone go back to your dorms. So, the prefects of each college led their first-year students towards the dormitory of the college, and a group of radish followed the prefects, like an eagle catching a chick. Slytherin's dormitory was at the bottom of the Black Lake. Lin followed the large group downstairs and came to a stone door hidden in the stone wall. Remember, this week's word is holy, the prefect said to everyone, and saw the stone door hidden in the stone wall slowly opening, revealing the common room inside. The Slytherin common room was a low basement with walls and ceiling of rough stone, and round, glowing green lamps hanging from the ceiling on chains. There is a huge glass not far away. Lin can see the view of the Black Lake through the glass. This huge glass makes the entire Slytherin common room look like an aquarium. Lin followed the guide to his bedroom. The bed in the Slytherin bedroom was a traditional 4-poster bed with green silk curtains and silver thread embroidery on the bed cover. In this dormitory, only the 4-poster bed in the northwest corner contained the backpack that Lin had previously placed in the train compartment, while the other 3 beds were very neat and tidy without any luggage. This surprised Lin. Judging from the sorting ceremony just now, I seem to be the last one to enter Slytherin. Could it be that I am the only one in this dormitory? Lin thought to himself. One dormitory can accommodate 4 little wizards. If the number of little wizards who are sorted into Slytherin before Lin happens to be a multiple of 4, then the extra Lin will naturally be assigned to a new dormitory. In other words, Lin can have an entire bedroom to herself. As for the remaining 3 beds, they will probably be reserved for the 3 newly admitted Slytherin students after the sorting ceremony next year. The night passed quickly. The first class in the morning was Professor McGonagall's Transfiguration class. In order not to be late, Lynn got up early and rushed to the Transfiguration classroom after breakfast. However, these moving stairs in the castle really gave him a big trouble. It took Lynn nearly half an hour to get from the auditorium to the Transfiguration classroom. This time, Lynn understood why Harry and Ron were late for the first class in the original book. Without some luck and strength, it is possible to spend half a day on this staircase. This Transfiguration class was taught by Gryffindor and Slytherin together. When Lynn came to the classroom, a tabby cat was sitting on the podium. Lynn knew that the tabby cat was Professor McGonagall's animagus form, so he bowed to the tabby cat and then sat down. This made Professor McGonagall couldn't help but take another look at Lynn. When the school bell rang, the tabby cat suddenly jumped forward and transformed into the human form of Professor McGonagall in the air, causing all the little wizards to scream. Professor McGonagall took 2 steps forward. She seemed very satisfied with the reaction of the little wizards. She said, "I'm glad to see you here, and I'm glad that no one is late for our first Transfiguration class. Maybe some people you have already learned the art of transformation, and some people know nothing about it, but regardless of whether you have learned the art of transformation in advance or not, I have to emphasize one thing first, and that is the basic law of transformation, Gamp's basic law of transformation. Gamp's basic law of transformation tells us that wizards can transform objects or create something. But it is worth mentioning that there are 5 exceptions, one of which is food. We can't conjure delicious food out of thin air, but if we know we can summon them wherever the food is, and if we have some food on hand, we can also cast spells to make it change or increase. Remember, never try to turn other items into food. There was once a wizard who turned a wooden table into bread and ate it because he couldn't find food. He later died because the magic that maintains the transformation is accompanied by time. It failed due to the passage of time, which caused the bread to turn into a wooden table again in his body, so when people found his body was full of wooden thorns. Transfiguration is the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts. No one is allowed to act naughty in my class, otherwise I will ask him out and deny him access to my transfiguration forever. Classroom. Moreover, if this wrong behavior causes casualties to other little wizards, he will even be tried by the Ministry of Magic. Professor McGonagall said very seriously. Everyone stopped talking. They were all frightened by the consequences of what Professor McGonagall said. At this moment, Lynn suddenly raised his hand and said, "Professor McGonagall, if a wizard has powerful enough magic power to be able to maintain the transformation spell until he grows old or dies, then the transformed couldn't food always exist in the form of food without causing harm to wizards?" Hearing this, Professor McGonagall shook his head and said, "Lynn, your question is very good. But I want to explain one thing, that is, the magic power required to maintain the transformation spell will gradually increase over time. As far as I know, no wizard has the magic power to sustain transfiguration for hundreds of years, not even Professor Dumbledore." Lin N nodded thoughtfully. From this point of view, the relationship between the magic power consumed to maintain the transformation and time is not a proportional function, but an exponential function. Professor McGonagall continued. Not only that, the magic power required to maintain the transformation is also related to the size of the object. If the object is large, the duration will be shorter. On the contrary, if the object is small, the duration will be shorter. Time will get longer. And what I need you to do in this transfiguration class is try to transform a match into a needle. Professor McGonagall said, giving everyone a match. Lynn took out the wand from his arms and whispered the spell. The match gradually changed under the control of the transformation technique. First, one end of it became thinner and thinner, and its entire body gradually glowed with silver light. After completing the external changes, Lynn tried changing the texture of the matches from wood to metal. But no matter how Lin N used his mind to control the match, it could only make its appearance more like a silver needle, but inside it was still a piece of wood. But even so, Lin's progress is already the fastest in this classroom. Professor McGonagall came over and saw the match that had turned into a silver needle in front of Lin N, and couldn't help but praise, "Well done." Although it was not completely successful, it is already good that the transformation can reach this level for the first time. For your excellent transfiguration, Slytherin adds 2 points. Thank you, Professor, Lynn said. During the rest of the transformation class, Lynn continued to try to change the texture of the match, and finally completed the transformation before the end of the get out of class, turning the match completely into a silver needle. This undoubtedly earned Lynn 2 more points for Slytherin. After leaving the transfiguration classroom, Lynn walked towards the potions classroom located underground in Hogwarts Castle. As they passed the auditorium, Lynn met Fred and George. "Hey, brother." Fred walked towards Lynn and patted him on the shoulder. George said from the side, "We didn't expect you to really enter Slytherin. After all, in our opinion, you are nothing like those little snakes." Lynn spread his hands and said honestly, "The Sorting Hat said that I have the characteristics of the 4 major houses at the same time, but in the end I was sorted into Slytherin." Lynn did not tell the 2 of them that it was he who wanted to go to Slytherin. Fred said regretfully, "What a pity you didn't come to Gryffindor." George said, "It doesn't matter, Fred, we are still good friends after all, right? By the way, Lynn, are you free tonight?" Fred continued, "If you are free, meet in the prize display room after the dinner tonight. We have something good to show you." Lynn nodded and said, "Of course. What good thing is it?" "A new toy from Zuko's joke shop." Fred chuckled and said, "What new toy? It's more exciting than toys." George said, "See you in the evening." After saying goodbye to the Weasley twins, Lynn came to the underground potions classroom. This is a large underground classroom that can accommodate at least 20 young wizards for classes. The shelves on the walls of the classroom are filled with various glass jars containing animal specimens soaked in solution. There is also a magic materials storage cabinet in the classroom, which stores various ingredients that students of all grades may use when making potions. The environment of the potions class is much colder than other classrooms in the castle. I don't know if it's because of the dim lights here or the scary animal specimens on the shelves. Bang! Suddenly, the potions classroom was suddenly opened, and Professor Snape, dressed in black robes, strode in as if he had his own blower. "You are here to learn the precise science and art of potion making," Professor Snape said, his voice barely above a whisper, but everyone heard him clearly. "Of every word, since there's no silly wand waving here, there are many of you who won't believe this is magic. I don't expect you to truly understand the beauty of the slowly simmering crucible emitting white smoke and bursting with fragrance. You don't really understand the liquid that flows into people's blood vessels, the kind that makes people feel fascinated and confused. Wonderful magic. However, for the very few smart people, I can teach you how to confuse your mind, how to confuse your senses. I can teach you how to increase your reputation, brew glory, and even prevent death, but there must be one thing, that is, you are not me only the stupid fools you often encounter." As Professor Snape spoke, he crossed his arms over his chest, like a big bat. At this time, the entire classroom was silent, and almost everyone was shocked by what Snape said. Lynn, who was sitting in the back, was very excited. After all, this was another famous scene. It's a pity that Lynn will be in 2nd year next year, otherwise he would still like to see the famous scene where Professor Snape asks Harry 3 questions. The potions class started smoothly. Professor Snape divided the young wizards into 2 groups and instructed them to mix and prepare a simple potion to treat boils. In the same group as Lynn was Erwin Foley, who had spoken to him at the dinner party yesterday. "I'll be responsible for processing the materials, and you'll brew the potion. How about that?" Erwin asked. Lynn nodded in agreement, so Irvine quickly weighed the nettles, crushed the snake's fangs, and handed the processed materials to Lynn one by one. Lynn, on the other hand, put the ingredients into the crucible one by one and cooked them. He had previewed the potions textbook in advance. Although he had not practiced it, his experience in chemistry classes in his previous life made him not like other little wizards. Fallible. Soon, the potion was brewed, and they were the first group in the classroom to complete the potion. Snape came over, swirled a drop of the liquid medicine between his fingers, put it in front of his nose and sniffed it. "Ordinary potions, not brilliant. However, because you finished the potion the fastest and didn't make any mistakes, Slytherin will add 5 points. Professor Snape said calmly. After the potions class, it was lunchtime, and Lynn and the others only had one class in the afternoon, which was Defense Against the Dark Arts class. Defense Against the Dark Arts Professor Wallison Green arrived in the classroom on time. Just like Wallison Green in the Chocolate Frog card, this Professor Green is a very serious-looking man, and deep in his eyes, there seems to be a touch of imperceptible gloom, which may be where he once was, caused by experience. Please put down your textbooks. You don't need to use textbooks in my class. Today we are going to learn common methods for dealing with some dark magic creatures. Professor Green scanned the classroom and spoke slowly. Remember, you are wizards, and the wand is your best tool to solve most problems. Maybe your textbooks think that you are only in the first grade and do not need to learn those self-defense magics, but this is my class, I don't accept your textbook's suggestion. Professor Green said, picking up a cage covered with a red cloth from behind. Professor Green opened the cage. Inside the cage was a seemingly petrified acromantula larva. It was obvious that Professor Green had just caught it from the Forbidden Forest. The full body binding curse is a spell that can effectively remove the threat from the opponent. Whether it is a black magic creature or a black wizard, it can be controlled by the full body binding curse. This is one of the most suitable spells for you to learn. 1. The spell of the whole body binding curse is, turn everything to stone. After it is cast, the effect is to make the arms and legs of the person being cursed stick together, and the whole body becomes stiff. The curse stops immediately, Professor Green said, and then lifted the spell on the acromantula larva in the cage. Pay attention to my demonstration. All of them will be petrified. Professor Green reminded the little wizards, and then gracefully waved the black wand in his hand. A white-gray light burst out from the top of the wand, hitting the acromantula larva in the cage with lightning speed. The acromantula had just lifted the spell, and before it could recover, it hit it again. Hit by a curse. I saw the 8 legs of this acromantula stuck together for an instant, and then the whole body became hard and fell into the cage. After completing the demonstration, Professor Green once again took out more than 20 cages from behind, each containing a lively acromantula larva. Today your task is to successfully release a full body binding spell. As long as you can turn the acromantula in front of you to stone, it will be considered a success. The first one to successfully release the spell will get 10 college points. Professor Green distributed these cages and said to the young wizards. Hearing Professor Green's words, all the little wizards were a little excited. Especially the Gryffindor little lions next door are all gearing up and planning to have a big fight. This is a full 10 college points. Even the combined academy points that Lynn obtained in the Transfiguration class and the Potions class were only 9 points. In this defense against the Dark Arts class, he only needed to cast a spell once to get 10 points from the academy point. How could this not excite these little wizards? Not only the little lions next door, but also the little snakes in Slytherin also had their eyes shining. Naturally, they who love honor will not miss this opportunity to add points. Chapter 11. The little lions and little snakes kept waving their wands and chanting spells, trying to petrify the acromantula in front of them. However, most of these little lions and little snakes were exposed to this kind of magic for the first time, and very few of them could cast magic. What's more, the acromantula itself has a certain amount of magic resistance and is too powerful. A weak whole body binding spell cannot turn it into stone. The sound of chanting curses was constantly coming from the defense against the Dark Arts classroom, but there were only a handful of gray-white rays of light that symbolized the petrification of everything. And these gray-white rays of light disappeared without any response after hitting the acromantula. Lynn was also trying to cast magic spells. When he was still in Roar Castle, he had already practiced the whole body binding spell. Although he has become a bit rusty in the past 2 months, he can still do it after practicing a few more times. Find the feeling of casting spells. All petrified, Lynn waved the wand again, and this time, a thicker gray-white light burst out, binding the acromantula in front of him in place. Although Lynn is not much better than his peers when it comes to casting other magics except the fire curse, his long-term practice of the fire curse has made his magic more active, which makes the growth rate of his magic power faster than that of his peers. And the power of the whole body binding spell cast by more powerful magic will naturally be more powerful. Very good, a perfect full body binding spell. Mr. Roar, because you were the first to successfully cast the spell, Slytherin gets 10 points. Professor Green saw the motionless acromantula larva in front of Lynn and nodded with satisfaction. In his expectation, it was enough for these little wizards to be able to cast a full body binding spell within 3 classes, and Lynn, who had already cast the spell before the first class was halfway through, was even more surprised. When this defense against the dark arts class was coming to an end, Erwin Foley also successfully released the full-body binding spell. Although it was not as powerful as Lin, it was still considered successful in controlling the Acromantula larva. This gave Slytherin another 2 bonus points. After class, Lin was not in a hurry to leave. "Mr. Roll, do you have any questions?" Professor Green noticed Lin, who was still sitting in his seat, so he asked. Lin scratched his head hesitantly and made a request. "Professor, I saw you on the Chocolate Frogs card and I know you are an alchemist. Although it is a bit presumptuous, but I don't know if I can follow you. Do you study alchemy?" Professor Green's attainments in alchemy are undoubted. If Lin wants to truly learn alchemy, then Professor Green will be a good choice. Hearing this, Professor Green was stunned and asked, "You want to learn alchemy? But doesn't Hogwarts itself have an alchemy course?" Professor Green himself is French. He was only invited by Dumbledore to join Hogwarts this year as the defense against the dark arts professor, so he is not familiar with other course arrangements at Hogwarts. Lin explained, "Professor, the alchemy class at Hogwarts is an elective course that can only be taken in the 6th grade. Even the Ancient Runes class is an elective course that can only be taken in the 3rd grade. This place is no better than Booth in France. Barton School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Hogwarts doesn't take alchemy seriously." "I see," Professor Green suddenly realized. "Have you ever taught yourself alchemy? Or ancient runes?" Lin said, "To be honest, I only came into contact with ancient runes yesterday. I studied by myself on the Hogwarts Express for a while, and I can currently remember a dozen simple runes words." Professor Green's eyes flashed with surprise. Learning runes is not easy. It is not easy to memorize a dozen runes words in less than a day. Professor Green hesitated for a moment, and then said, "If you are willing, come to my office at noon on Saturday to see me. I will provide you with a list of books that are useful for learning alchemy and give you some guidance." Lin En was overjoyed, and he quickly thanked him. "Thank you, Professor Green." Professor Green waved his hand and added, "By the way, if you want to learn more advanced alchemy in the future, I suggest you work more on fire control spells such as flame spells, because part of the alchemy process affects the ambient temperature. The requirements are relatively high." Hearing this, Lin's expression moved slightly. He waved his wand lightly, and with a beautiful silent spell, a ball of flame was formed out of thin air, jumping happily in the air, and constantly changing into various shapes according to Lin's will. Seeing this scene, even Professor Green, who had seen the world, couldn't sit still. "Silent casting. Are you sure you're just a freshman?" Professor Green said incredulously. You know, even Professor Green himself was only able to cast spells silently when he was in his 30s, and Lin's control over flames is so powerful that he is already comparable to him when he invented the Forbidden Demon Stone. Lin En said with a smile, "Professor, controlling flames is a special talent of mine. If this ability can help me learn alchemy, that would be great." Professor Green nodded slightly. He looked at Lin with burning eyes and said, "Before you see me on Saturday, can you memorize all the words in A Simple Introduction to Ancient Magic Texts?" Lin thought about it and agreed. Although A Simple Introduction to Ancient Magic Texts is a complete textbook, it contains only 100 or so runic words. Lin En has worked hard these days and can still do it just by writing them down. "Okay, that's it, you go back first." Professor Green waved his hand and said. Lin thanked Professor Green again and then left the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom. After Lin left the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, Professor Green remained frozen in place, with a gloomy look on his face and a gloomy look in his eyes. He looked towards the direction Lin En left and whispered to himself, "Such a talented student may be the compensation given to me by fate. If he can grow up, maybe he can complete that thing for me." On the other side, Lin returned to his dormitory. Having the whole dormitory to himself allowed him to avoid being affected by his roommates. He took out A Simple Introduction to Ancient Runes that he had borrowed from the Weasley twins and quickly entered the state of immersive learning. Lin's interest in alchemy is not just a whim. Alchemy is a profession with long-term investment and high returns. Even if Lin does not engage in this profession in the future, alchemy itself as a manifestation of ability is enough to make him. Lin was determined to learn it. Soon, it was time for dinner again. The food at dinners on weekdays is naturally not as rich as the back-to-school dinner, but even so, the food on the plate is enough to keep all the little wizards full. After the dinner, Lynn came to the prize display room on the 4th floor as promised. Surprisingly, Fred and George seemed to have been waiting here for a long time. The two were sitting on the floor, with a large dung bomb placed on the ground in the middle. They seemed to be discussing something. Seeing Lin N's arrival, the two put away the dung bombs, patted their butts and stood up. "It's finally here, Lin. Come here and show you our big baby," George said with a smile and gently closed the door of the trophy display room. Fred exaggeratedly pulled out a large square piece of parchment from the wizard's robe. The parchment seemed to be very worn, and there was nothing visible on it. Anyone who sees this parchment will probably think that it is just an ordinary piece of garbage that no one wants. But Lin was different. He was familiar with the original work and naturally knew that this parchment was the legendary Marauder's map. "What is this? I can feel the magic fluctuations on this parchment. It doesn't seem to be an ordinary parchment," Lin asked knowingly. "You are very discerning. This is the secret of our success." George caressed the parchment lovingly, as if caressing his girlfriend. Fred said, "This is our secret weapon to break into Hogwarts. It allows us to master many secret passages that even Filch doesn't know, and allows us to avoid being caught when we play pranks." Lin shrugged and motioned for the two of them to show it off. George pulled out his wand, tapped the parchment lightly, and said, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." In an instant, thin lines of ink spread like a spider's web from where the tip of George's wand had touched, connecting with each other, crisscrossing, and extending to every corner of the parchment. Then, words appeared on the parchment, which were large green characters. "Introducing Moonface, Wormtail, Padfoot and Prongs, gentlemen helping magical mischief makers, the Marauder's map." The map showed all the details of Hogwarts castle and grounds, but what was most unusual was that there were many small black dots moving across the map, each with a name in tiny font. On the Marauder's map, Lin could see Professor Snape walking around in the potions classroom, seemingly getting potion ingredients. Professor Green was motionless in the defense against the dark arts professor's office, perhaps doing something. Alchemy experiment. Professor Dumbledore took 2 steps in the principal's office and then disappeared without a trace. Lin guessed that he apparated away through the flames of Phoenix Fox. In addition to Hogwarts Castle, Lin could also see some strange passages, and what these passages had in common was that they all led to Hogsmeade. There are 7 passages leading to Hogsmeade, of which Filch knows these 4. Fred gestured with the passages on the Marauder's map. "I believe the other 3 are only the 2 of us. Oh no, the 3 of us." "I know. Try not to use the one behind the mirror on the 5th floor. That passage looks a little loose, and I bet it's going to collapse in 5 years. There is also this one. The entrance is at the base of the Whomping Willow. It is probably not used by anyone. As for the remaining one, the entrance is on the one-eyed old woman's hunchback outside the classroom. Through it, you can go straight to Honeyduke's cellar. This is the one we take most often." Fred introduced the secret passages of Hogwarts to Lin. Lin nodded slightly. He planned to tell the Weasley twins about the secret passage from the Whomping Willow to the Shrieking Shack next time. As for now, he had just gotten the Marauder's map and he had no reason to know about it. "Moonface, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs," George exclaimed, patting the title of the map, "thanks to them. Noble man, working tirelessly to help a new generation of offending students," said Fred solemnly. "Yeah," George agreed briskly, "don't forget to dissipate when you're done. Otherwise they'll all see it," Fred warned. "Just tap it again and say, 'Prank over.' And it will become a blank piece of paper again." As George said, he tapped the Marauder's map again with his wand and changed the writing on the Marauder's map. "Eliminate." Fred smiled and said to Lin, "If you need the Marauder's map, you can ask us for it at any time. Of course, we can also use it to sneak out and play together. By the way, we plan to go to Huo through the secret passage this Saturday. Grimmit's Zuko Joke Shop. Do you want to join me?" After the 3rd year of Hogwarts, the little wizards can go to Hogsmeade every weekend with the signature of their guardian. However, the Weasley twins are only in their 2nd year this year and cannot go to Hogwarts through formal channels. So the secret road recorded in the Marauder's map became their way to Hogsmeade. Lin N shook his head and said, "I have an appointment with Professor Green at noon this Saturday. He is willing to give me some guidance on alchemy. If you don't mind, I can also teach him the alchemy knowledge I have learned, you. Hearing this, both of them were a little surprised. They didn't expect that Lin En had already taken the path of Professor Green. Cool, the famous French alchemist personally guides, really worthy of Lin. You are amazing, I will give you a thumbs up. Fred and George clapped simultaneously. Fred said, in that case, let's go to Hogsmeade together on Sunday. Lin, don't forget to bring us alchemy knowledge. Lin En smiled and nodded. Well, dogs Fugi, bark at each other. Although Lin En's words made the two of them a little confused, they knew what Lin En meant and laughed heartily. By the way, I may need to borrow your alchemy book for a while. Please tell that Ravenclaw Sr. Lin said. After all, the books in his hands were borrowed by the Weasley twins from others. He was embarrassed to possess it with peace of mind. Fred and George looked at each other, and then George said, don't worry about this. Just after yesterday's dinner, the Ravenclaw Sr. came to us and said that he would give us the books directly. So you can just take a look and let's borrow another one. The Ravenclaw Sr. was already in the 6th grade, and the ancient rune textbooks for the 3rd grade had naturally been eliminated long ago. Since he had no brothers and sisters in his family, these books had no room for recycling, so the Ravenclaw Sr. Lau thought that instead of wasting these books, he might as well give them to the Weasley twins as a favor. Time passed quickly, and it was already Saturday in just a blink of an eye. Lin En came to the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor's office as scheduled after the luncheon. He held a simple introduction to ancient runes in his left hand, and gently knocked on the office door with his right hand. It's quite on time, come in. Professor Green opened the office door and let Lin in. Lin walked into the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor's office and looked around curiously. I saw that the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor's office was divided into 3 areas under the arrangement of Professor Green. The outermost area was a desk sandwiched between 2 bookshelves. This seemed to be the place where Professor Green corrected students' homework and prepared lesson plans. Further inside, there were dozens of cages covered with red cloth stacked on top of each other. Lin guessed that these were teaching materials prepared by Professor Green, just like those Acromantula larvae on Monday, and these textbooks were most likely captured by Professor Green from the Forbidden Forest. As for the innermost part of the office, there were a large number of alchemy equipment, with countless metallic lusters flashing. Lin also saw a prism-shaped equipment, with a set of lines flashing red light that was continuously spraying flames upwards. Have you memorized a simple introduction to ancient magic texts I asked you to recite on Monday? Professor Green closed the office door, waved his wand and used transfiguration to conjure a chair, and motioned for Lin to sit down. Lin En sat down obediently, nodded and said, I remember everything. So Professor Green opened his mouth and asked a few ancient rune words contained in a simple introduction to ancient magic texts, and Lin also answered fluently. Very well, take this. Professor Green nodded with satisfaction and handed the 2 notes to Lin. Lin looked down and saw that one of the slips of paper had the name of the book densely written on it, while the other slip of paper had the signature of a lone Professor Green. These are the books related to alchemy that you need to study on your own next. Just read them in order. As for the last few books, they are only available in the restricted book section of the library. You can borrow them with the signature slip I gave you. Professor Green said calmly, a glimmer of light flashed in his light blue eyes. He didn't seem to worry that Lin would use his signature slip to do anything else. Okay, Professor Green. Lin put the note away. Professor Green turned around, crossed the desk and walked towards the deepest part of the office. He stood in front of the prism-shaped alchemy equipment that Lin had seen before. He turned around and said, come here, Lin. Lin raised his feet and came to Professor Green's side. In front of the 2 of them, this group of red lines was still releasing flames. The flames brought a hot breath, but unexpectedly made Lin feel a little comfortable. You think these endless flames are generated by this set of runes, right? Professor Green pointed at this set of runes and asked. Lin thought for a moment, nodded and said, yes, Professor. There was nothing else on this device except this set of runes. Lin indeed believed that the flame was produced by this set of runes. Moreover, Lin also felt the aura of magic from this set of runes. Hearing this, Professor Green smiled and shook his head. He pulled out his wand and pointed gently at the device. The bottom of the prism suddenly cracked, revealing a glowing fluorescent crystal inside. This crystal kept blooming with light, and bursts of magical power spread from it. Obviously, this crystal is the real energy source of the flame. This is a product that I imitated my teacher's magic stone. However, it does not have the power of turning stone into gold and immortality like the magic stone. It can only store our magic power and release it when we need it. Professor Green explained, but, after this incident, what did you understand? Lin En tentatively replied, nothing is created out of thin air. If you want to get something, you must pay a price of equal value. Professor Green nodded with satisfaction. Yes, remember, the most basic rule of alchemy is equivalent exchange. If you want to get something, you must pay something of equal value. This is what every alchemist must do in the alchemy process. There is a principle that must be followed. If you have read books related to alchemy, you should also know this basic rule. Alchemy is different from idealistic magic. It is not the other side that you can reach with a wave of a magic wand. It is true that it cannot let us get what we want easily, but its value is even greater. It can let you have eternal. The gloomy look in Professor Green's eyes was replaced by a lofty and faith-filled light, and his words were full of convincing power. In addition, there are 2 taboos in alchemy that you must remember. Professor Green's expression suddenly became serious. Lin guessed, time and soul. Hearing this, Professor Green shook his head and said, that is a taboo on magic. There are only 2 taboos on alchemy. One is that it can never cross the realm of God, and the other is that alchemy on the human body is prohibited. Lin nodded thoughtfully. Since the original work repeatedly emphasized the dangers of playing with time and soul in many aspects, including the time turner and Voldemort's Horcrux fragments, Lin subconsciously thought that these 2 were taboos in alchemy. But Professor Green woke him up. Yes, although magic and alchemy have something in common, they are 2 different systems and cannot be generalized. Moreover, the time turner itself is an alchemical product. If time is really a taboo in alchemy, then there will be no time turner. After telling Lin the basic rules and 2 taboos of alchemy, Professor Green also talked about many methods of learning ancient runes, as well as the basic knowledge of alchemy, which allowed Lin to learn all the ancient runes. After reading this article, you can directly enter the door of alchemy without any hindrance. Bring this with you, it can weaken your magical power to 1/10 of its original value. After explaining the theoretical knowledge, Professor Green handed another bracelet to Lin. Seeing the crystals inlaid on the bracelet, Lin couldn't help but exclaimed, Forbidden Magic Stone. You know, among the achievements of Professor Green recorded on the chocolate frog card, there is the Forbidden Demon Stone, and the effect of the Forbidden Demon Stone is known to the public as just to weaken the wizard's magical power by 10%, then only a Forbidden Demon Stone the size of a quaffle can do it. However, the Forbidden Magic Stone embedded in the bracelet is only the size of a fingernail, but it can suppress 90% of Lin En's magical power. Could it be that the fact is just like Lin's original analysis, that the Forbidden Demon Stone released by Professor Green is actually a weakened version, and the reason why the initial version of the Forbidden Demon Stone was not released was to prevent it from being used by various parties, banned due to fear from the Ministry of Magic? Professor Green seemed to see what Lin was thinking. He nodded slightly and said, as you may think, in order not to be feared by the major ministries of magic, I deliberately reduced the alchemical power contained in the Forbidden Magic Stone that was announced to the public. And this is my real proud work. As for taking it out today, it is to test the power of your fire magic. The fire magic suppressed by the Forbidden Magic Stone will not burn down my office, and I can also restore it through data. The power it has in itself. Lin En understood, and he put on the magic forbidden bracelet handed to him by Professor Green. A suppressed breath came, and Lin suddenly felt a little out of breath. He could feel that the flow of magic power in his body had slowed down significantly, and the speed of his own magic seemed to have slowed down. This is because magic has been flowing in your body for a long time, so this sudden power to suppress magic will cause your body's instinctive discomfort. Take a deep breath and try your best to let your body adapt to it, Professor Green said. Lin did as Professor Green said and the discomfort quickly eased. Lin waved his wand, and a flame burned between the 2 of them. As Professor Green described it, this magic forbidden bracelet suppressed 90% of Lin's ability to control magic. Assuming that the diameter of the flames Lin can cast can reach up to 10 meters, Then now he can release flames with a diameter of up to 1 meter, and the decline in control of the flames means that he can no longer control the changes of the flames as he wishes. You don't need to deliberately control the shape of the flame. You just need to output as much magic power as possible to make the flame reach its maximum power. Professor Green said to Lin En. What he wanted to test was the maximum power of the flame magic cast by Lin En, rather than Lin's control over the flames. So Lin En no longer controlled the changes in the flames, but tried his best to make the flames more powerful. Soon, Lin's flame spell had reached its limit. Lin had a premonition that if he continued to strengthen its power, the flame would immediately get out of control. Okay, stop. Professor Green felt that it was almost done, so he asked Lin to withdraw the flame, then took off the magic forbidden bracelet from Lin's wrist and put it away. Immediately afterwards, Professor Green picked up a camera-shaped alchemical product from the table not far away. This alchemical product kept shining when Lin released the fire spell. The data collection is almost done. Let me see the original power of your fire spell. Professor Green said while tapping the alchemy product several times quickly. A curtain of light was projected from the lens of this alchemical product, which was suspected to be a camera, and hit the ground, revealing the outline of Lin En's body. In addition, a series of ancient runic symbols appeared one after another next to this body model. With Lin's current vocabulary of ancient rune words, he could only barely distinguish the words fire, magic, level, and so on. This is an alchemy product made by my teacher that can evaluate magical abilities, called the Magic Power Evaluator. According to the data analysis provided by the Magic Power Evaluator, your current fire spell level is equivalent to that of an auror. Professor Green said, clicking on the magic energy estimator a few times and retracting the projected light screen. Professor Green looked at Lin and said, although the magic power in your body is limited, in terms of control of the fire curse alone, you are no weaker than the aurors of the Ministry of Magic. I think you can start trying the wandless casting of the fire curse. Under normal circumstances, a wizard needs to use a wand to successfully perform magic. Because without a wand to guide the magic, it is difficult for the wizard to control the flow of magic in the body. Specifically, it is like data cable charging and wireless charging. Therefore, wandless spellcasting is an extremely inefficient method of spellcasting. Without the assistance of the wand, the wizard needs to consume more magic power to release the same level of magic, which places certain requirements on the magic power reserve in the wizard's body. The magic power reserve in a wizard's body will become stable and reach its peak after reaching adulthood. This is why no matter how talented a wizard is, he must master wandless spellcasting after he reaches adulthood. But Lin has a special talent in flame control, which allows him to convert magic power into flames more efficiently, which also gives him the opportunity to try wandless spellcasting. At this point, someone may want to ask, since wandless spellcasting is inefficient, why are there so many people keen on trying wandless spellcasting? You know, there are many ways for a wizard to take away the opponent's wand. The disarming spell is the most typical way to take away the opponent's wand. After losing the wand, the wizard must have a way to protect himself. At this time, without a wand, spellcasting became a lifesaver for a wizard who lost his wand. Moreover, long-term wandless spellcasting can train the wizard's ability to control the magic power in the body, and feedback the spellcasting ability when using a wand, making it more powerful when using a wand to cast spells. Wandless casting. Professor, what should I do? Lin asked. Professor Green said, I think when you tried to cast a spell silently, you should have felt the trajectory of the magic power in your body when the fire spell was emitted, right? Lin En nodded and said, that's true. I can feel that the magic power is flowing in a specific trajectory, and eventually flows to the wand and turns into the form of flame. However, it is difficult for me to grasp this trajectory. Although I tried to cast the spell silently, I actively control the flow of magic power from time to time, but most of my magic power still flows passively when I recite spells silently, and my efforts are only to speed up the efficiency of its flow. Professor Green continued, you are going in the right direction. Next, you only need to continue to explore the trajectory of this magic while casting spells silently, and then try to change the final magic direction from your wand to yours body, so that you can cast spells normally without your wand. If it were anyone else, even if the wandless spellcasting was successful, the power of the flames would certainly be much smaller. But you are different. Your special affinity for flames allows the flames to be absorbed by you even if they leave your body. Mastery, this is your advantage. Professor Green said decisively. As a result, Lin began to feel the flow of magic power in his body when he released the fire spell. The afternoon passed quickly. With the help of Professor Green, Lin managed to find a fixed flow path of magic power. However, when he put down his wand and tried to change the direction of the final magic power from flowing to the wand to flowing to the palm of his hand, the magic power in his body seemed to have stagnated and no longer obeyed his command. Okay, let's stop here. To be honest, I was very surprised that you were able to figure out the flow of magic power today. For the rest, you go back and practice slowly. Remember, nothing can be achieved overnight. Professor Green patted Lin's shoulder and signaled Lin to stop. His eyes were filled with admiration for Lin. Professor Green said, after you go back, memorize the ancient runes recorded in the first 3 books of the book list as soon as possible, and then I will take you to the threshold of alchemy in advance. Lin saluted Professor Green. Okay, thank you, Professor. After leaving the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor's office, Lin headed towards the library with his book list. On the way, Lin met Fred and George. He returned the books he had borrowed before to them so that they would not have to borrow new ones. Brother, what are you doing? Fred was a little confused. Lin showed the book list he got from Professor Green and said, the professor asked me to read the books on it. I will copy this book list for you, as well as my alchemy notes in the afternoon. Hearing this, Fred and George looked at each other, and they both saw excitement in each other's eyes. George quickly stepped forward and put his arms around Lin's neck, and Fred also leaned in, arms around each other. As expected of a good brother. I cried to death. Then our knowledge of alchemy. Just leave it to our dear Lin. The two sang and talked in harmony, their words showing their happiness. Lin agreed and made an appointment with the two to go to Hogsmeade through the secret passage the next day. After being separated from the Weasley twins, Lin went to the Hogwarts library and borrowed 5 books at once. According to Professor Green's request, he only needs to memorize the knowledge points of the first 3 books to truly enter the threshold of alchemy, and the latter 2 books can help him familiarize himself with and practice basic alchemy. Books in the wizarding world are generally full of nonsense, and the really useful content only takes up less than 1/10 of the whole book. Even though the books Lin borrowed have been carefully selected by Professor Green, 1 book is worthless. The amount of knowledge that could help Lin was only about 1/3. This is why, most of the previous professors of Defense Against the Dark Arts at Hogwarts would choose to give students practical lessons, no matter how bad it is. The textbooks and practice are integrated, even the idiot Gilderoy Lockhart, at the beginning when the understanding is not clear. The first class is also a practical class. Of course, a certain pink waste is a different matter. This kind of nonsense textbooks and books is also one of the reasons why little wizards generally have poor grades. However, Lin, who has studied high school Chinese, naturally has a certain ability to extract information, and more than 10 years of exam-oriented education has made him far more efficient in learning than ordinary people. In just one day, Lin read 1/3 of the first book. At this moment, it was already time for Lin and Weasley to head to Hogsmeade as agreed upon. Lin put down the books in his hands, hung a canvas bag with the untraceable stretch charm on his waist, and then quickly walked out of the Slytherin common room and headed for the 4th floor. Soon, Lin arrived at the One-Eyed Witch on the 4th floor. He saw Fred and George behind the One-Eyed Witch. Come on. George called Lin over, then took out his wand and knocked the One-Eyed Witch, separate left and right. The hunchback of the One-Eyed Witch statue opens up, and the hole is large enough to accommodate a thin person. I see, Filch is still in the broom room on the 1st floor, go. George quickly glanced at the Marauder's map in his hand, headfirst into the hole, and walked forward. Lin and Fred followed closely behind. After entering the cave entrance, Fred turned back and cast a spell to restore the cave entrance to its original state. The 3 of them moved forward in the secret passage and soon came across a stone slide. They slid down a long section of the stone slide and then fell to the cold, wet dirt at the bottom. It was pitch black and I couldn't see anything. Fluorescent flickering. Fluorescent flickering. Fred and George cast the luminous charm at the same time, and 2 balls of light lit up at the tops of their wands. Lin waved his wand, releasing a ball of flame floating beside him. The red flame shined brightly, instantly overshadowing the glowing spell of the Weasley twins. "Please, you make us look useless like this," Fred complained softly, and together with George, he extinguished the fluorescent light on the tip of the wand. Lin smiled and said. The light of the luminous spell appeared on the top of the wand, blocking the outlet for the magic to pour out. This made it impossible for us to cast other spells at the same time. If we were in danger, we had to extinguish the luminous spell first. The flame summoned by the fire spell is an independent light source, which allows us to release other magic while casting the fire spell, which is much safer. Although Lin knew that the end of this secret passage was Honeyduke's cellar, his cautious character still allowed him to leave enough escape routes for himself at any time. "Cool, you know better." The two raised their thumbs up. Lin observed the surrounding environment. They were in a narrow and low dirt passage. The passage ahead was winding and the ground was uneven. It was more like a giant rabbit hole than a tunnel. The three walked unhurriedly, and after an unknown amount of time, they came to a trapdoor. On the other side of the trapdoor was a cellar filled with crates and other wooden boxes. The three quickly escaped from the cellar and walked down the stairs to Honeyduke's shop. Every Sunday, Honeyduke's is filled with countless little wizards from Hogwarts, and today is no exception. The Honeyduke's shop is not that big, and under such a crowded situation, the three of Lin and N who suddenly appeared in the shop would not be noticeable. Doorway. It finally came out. "Yeah, it suffocates me, especially that ant, who smells like perfume." Fred and George gasped for air. Lin smiled and said, "Do you have anything you want to eat?" "My treat." Fred and George looked at each other and said in unison, "You can do whatever you want, we don't want to go in anyway." Hearing this, Lin spread his hands helplessly, and returned to Honeyduke's alone. He walked towards the depths of Honeyduke's while looking at the delicacies on various shelves. I saw rows of shelves filled with delicious and juicy candies, including large pieces of creamy almond candy, sparkling pink coconut sorbet, honey-colored toffee, and hundreds of neatly arranged chocolates, a big bucket of BB's multi-flavored beans, and a big bucket of Zizzy honey. Against the other wall are some special effect candies, such as the Schweebau Super Bubble Gum that fills the room with bubbles the color of bluebells and lasts for several days, and the strange, crunchy and fragile fluffy tooth mints. The small and black pepper urchin that breathes fire after eating, the ice mouse that makes the teeth of the eater squeak, the toad-shaped mint ice cream that jumps in the stomach, the crispy feather candies woven with sugar threads, there are also exploding gummy candies and more. Of course, Lin really couldn't appreciate these so-called special effects candies. Perhaps only the prank-loving Weasley twins would like these special effects candies. After all, they also invented many such prank products later. Thinking of this, Lin took 2 copies of each of these special effect candies and planned to buy them for the Weasley twins. After picking out some snacks for herself, Lin quickly checked out and left Honeyduke's to join the Weasley twins. "Here, I bought these for you." Lin handed the large bag of special effects candy to Fred and George. Fred and George were both very surprised after receiving this large bag of special effect candies. These special effect candies are good reference materials for researching prank products. They originally planned to go to Zuko's joke shop to buy some prank products as reference materials for researching their own prank products. The reason why they did not come to Honeyduke's to buy special effect candies but went to Zuko's joke shop was because of Zuko's. The joke shop itself is a store that specializes in selling joke products, but it's more because they can't afford too many Honeyduke's snacks. This can be seen from the fact that they can only eat sandwiches made by Mrs. Weasley on the train and are reluctant to buy snacks. After learning the two's intention to come to Hogsmeade, Lin asked, "Then are you still going to Zuko's joke shop?" Fred nodded and said, "Of course. Even if we don't buy anything else, we still have to purchase some dung bombs. Our recent goal is to improve the power of dung bombs, but we have used up all the dung bombs in our hands." Quote. So, Lin put the snacks of the 3 people into the canvas bag that had been casted with the traceless stretching spell, and then walked lightly towards Zuko's joke shop again. Hogsmeade really deserves to be the largest wizarding village in the British wizarding world. The flow of people is no less than the main street in the Muggle world. The wizards coming and going carry the things they just bought in their hands, chatting with their companions, walking with a smile. Zuko's joke shop was not far from Honeyduke's, and the 3 of them arrived at their destination in just a short while. The Weasley twins bought a batch of dung bombs with the pocket money they had treasured for a long time, while Lynn bought a shorthand quill when passing by the Scholars' Quill specialty store. "Would you like to go have a drink at the Three Broomsticks?" Fred suggested. Lynn and George agreed. The interior of the Three Broomsticks is very tidy, and the bar counter is spacious, bright, clean and warm, which is much better than the leaky cauldron that Lynn has been to before. Ms. Rosmerta runs the Three Broomsticks bar. She looks graceful and charming. Many little wizards like her. In the original book, Ron Weasley even had a crush on Ms. Rosmerta when he was in 6th grade. A very long time. "Good afternoon, Ms. Rosmerta, please have 3 butterbeers." Fred happily greeted Ms. Rosmerta. Ms. Rosmerta looked at the three of Lynn and said with a smile, "Fred, George, I didn't expect you to kidnap a first-year student here. What's the name of this little Slytherin wizard?" Lynn shook hands with Ms. Rosmerta. Lynn Roar, "Nice to meet you, ma'am." After getting to know Ms. Rosmerta asked them to find a seat and sit down. The three of them came inside the bar and sat down next to the window and the fireplace. After a few minutes, 3 mugs of hot, frothy butterbeer were served. "Cheers." Lynn and the three of them raised their glasses at the same time and took a swig. Lynn felt that the butterbeer didn't seem to be real wine, but had a sweet taste. After drinking it, he felt that every inch of his body was warmed up. Just as the three of Lynn finished their butterbeer and were about to get up and leave, George suddenly called out to them, "Wait, look. That's Professor Green." Following George's gaze, Lynn found that Professor Green, whom he had just met yesterday, walked into the bar, but he was completely different from him in Hogwarts. At this time, he looked very gloomy, light blue, his eyes were full of gloom. 5 shots of fire whiskey, Professor Green said calmly, and he found a place to sit in the deepest part of the bar. After the spirits were served on the table, Professor Green drank it in a big gulp. Lynn could see that his eyes were very moist. It was obvious that Professor Green was not enjoying the wine at this time, but was using it to relieve his sorrow. At this time, Ms. Rosmerta came to them, saw Lynn and the others with puzzled eyes, and sighed, "Oh, Professor Green, in order to be able to teach you in the best state, he has accumulated all his troubles and pains. Deep in his heart, I am afraid that only now can he vent himself wantonly." Lynn hesitated and asked, "Ms. Rosmerta, Professor Green seems to have a troubled past." Ms. Rosmerta said, "Yes, but it is not convenient for me to tell you this. After all, it is Mr. Green's privacy." Lynn was silent for a moment and did not ask any more questions. Instead, he quietly waited for Professor Green to finish drinking and leave before returning to Hogwarts with the Weasley twins. The reason why he didn't leave directly before was probably because he knew that Professor Green didn't want his students to see him like this. On the way back, the three of them remained silent until they opened the one-eyed witch statue again and entered the castle. Professor Green's appearance just now was really terrifying. I can't imagine that he, who was so kind in class, would have such a side. George said in a low voice. Fred said, "Perhaps he encountered some problem, but if even Professor Green can't solve the problem, how can we help him?" Lynn patted the two of them on the shoulders and said, "Don't mention this matter to anyone. The only way we can help Professor Green is to cause him less trouble. Of course, bro, we'll rot it in our stomachs. Excrete it together with the feces. Then forget it completely." The Weasley twins seemed to be back to their usual self, singing and talking in harmony. After parting ways with the Weasley twins, Lynn returned to the Slytherin common room to continue studying the 3 ancient rune books. However, no matter how much he wanted to forget what happened in the Three Broomsticks pub, but Professor Green's appearance is still fresh in my memory. It was another Saturday. In these 6 days, Lynn N had devoured all the knowledge points in the first 3 books on the list. He even memorized the knowledge points in the 4th book about the introduction to alchemy. Standing outside the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor's office, Lynn felt a little uneasy and excited. You know, Professor Green clearly told him a week ago that as long as he could read the first 3 books, he could lead him ahead of schedule. Step into the threshold of alchemy. The door to the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor's office was opened. Professor Green's expression was as usual, no different from when he was teaching everyone a Defense Against the Dark Arts class. He invited Lynn into the office. "Professor, I have read the first 3 books in the book list you gave me, and I have also read roughly the 4th book. Without waiting for Professor Green to speak, Lin En took the initiative. Hearing this, Professor Green was suddenly a little surprised. Even when he was studying alchemy, it took him 2.5 weeks to read the knowledge points in these 3 books. What does this alchemical rune mean? Professor Green raised his hand and used his wand to outline a combination of ancient runes and alchemical runes in the air, and asked Lin En to take the exam. In the 3rd book of the book list, there are records of some special runes that combine ancient runes and alchemical runes. These are necessary runes for some advanced alchemy. Even alchemists can directly simply engrave these alchemical runes on alchemical products to make them work. Under normal circumstances, alchemical runes need to be stimulated by some special materials or magic power in order to play their due role, but these special alchemical runes are different, they can work directly. This is why Professor Green said that as long as Lin can learn these, he can directly enter the threshold of alchemy. After all, even if Lin didn't know other alchemical knowledge, he could give these items special abilities simply by engraving these special alchemical runes on some items. This alchemy rune means strengthening. It can strengthen the original effect of a magic product to a certain extent, and the degree of enhancement depends on its original magic strength. Lin En just glanced at the alchemy rune in the air. Wen replied quickly. Professor Green once again outlined an alchemical rune and asked, "What about this alchemical rune?" Lin En answered fluently. This alchemical rune means explosion, and can cause objects engraved with this alchemical rune to explode, but its activation condition is magic power. Professor Green sketched another alchemical rune that looked like a rectangle. Lin En drew inferences. This alchemy rune means obstruction, and it can hinder the flow of magic power. If you connect this alchemy rune with the alchemy rune just now, that means explosion, then you can form a special rune that delays explosion. It can make objects engraved with these 2 runes delay their explosion for a period of time after being injected with magic power. Hearing this, Professor Green nodded with satisfaction. Professor Green said, "Very good, it seems that I don't need to continue taking the exam. Your thinking is very flexible. Even if you have not studied alchemy systematically, you have guessed some of the fields of alchemy. Next, let me lead you into the realm of alchemy." Lin looked at Professor Green with an expectant look on his face. Just listen to Professor Green say. Generally speaking, alchemists are divided into 2 schools. One is the legal alchemist who focuses on refining alchemical materials and creates alchemical products from scratch. It is an array alchemist who carves alchemical runes and connects them together to form an alchemical array as the core, and performs secondary enchantment on existing things to turn them into alchemical products. Among them, the representative of the legal alchemist, the alchemy product is the magic stone of teacher Nico Flamel, and the representative alchemy product of the array alchemist is Hogwarts Castle. The countless defensive arrays in Hogwarts Castle are made by generations of array alchemists, added for it. After describing the 2 schools of alchemists, Professor Green asked, "So, Lin, which school are you going to join?" Lin hesitated. The 2 schools of alchemy explained by Professor Green were particularly attractive, whether it was the Philosopher's Stone refined by Mr. Nico Flamel or the Hogwarts Castle that had passed through the hands of countless alchemists. Defensive arrays are very convincing things. "Professor, which school of alchemist are you?" Lin asked. As the teacher who teaches Lin alchemy, Professor Green's choice has great reference significance. Hearing this, Professor Green laughed. He patted Lin on the shoulder and said, "I am a double cultivator of formations. As the name suggests, I practice 2 schools of alchemy at the same time. My Forbidden Stone is the product of the combination of the 2 alchemy schools. It is not only an alchemy product made by refining various alchemy materials, but I also engraved a large number of alchemy circles on it to make it more powerful. Of course, if only I announced it to the world, the weakened version of the Sorcerer's Stone, sought after by the major Ministry of Magic as the product of legal alchemy. After all, there is no alchemy circle on the weakened version of the Sorcerer's Stone. However, not everyone can practice both formation and formation like me. After all, the alchemical knowledge of each alchemy school is enough to consume all the energy of an alchemist. Not everyone has enough time, energy and talent to practice the alchemy of 2 different alchemy schools at the same time," Professor Green said, looking at Lin. After learning about Professor Green's choice that year, Lin En said without hesitation, "In that case, Professor Green, I also want to practice both formations." Whether it is time, energy or talent, this is what Lin currently has. Since he has the ability, why not study the two alchemy schools together? Hearing Lin En's choice, Professor Green seemed to be relieved. He said happily, "Very good. You are worthy of being the student I selected. Since you have chosen to practice both formations and formations like me, I will teach you as much as possible. Let you go further on the road of alchemy. Lin, are you willing to become my teacher and learn my alchemy?" The apprenticeship that Professor Green is talking about is not the teacher-student relationship at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, but the inheritance of the apprenticeship. If Lin En agrees, then Lin En will be Professor Green's personal disciple. Lin En nodded and said, "Professor Green, I would like to become your teacher and learn alchemy from you." Professor Green happily agreed. He took out 3 things from the pocket where the traceless stretching spell was cast, namely a metal bracelet, a 1-meter-long scepter and a sharp dagger. It was handed to Lin. "Although I am French, I also know that your British magic world has not been peaceful these years, so I plan to give you some self-defense alchemy tools as a gift for you after you become my master. I don't need to say more about this first magic forbidden bracelet. This scepter is a one-time activation of the magic forbidden scepter. It can burst out the power of the magic forbidden stone after you inject magic power, suppressing anything within a radius of 100 meters. The power of magic makes wizards within the range unable to cast magic like dumb guns. However, the forbidden magic scepter can at most suppress Auror-level magic, and its effect on Demon King-level wizards is extremely limited. As for the third one, I carved it myself. The dagger of the alchemy circle with the sharp attribute can give you the ability to protect yourself within the forbidden area." Professor Green introduced that judging from the new magical atmosphere of these 3 alchemical products, Professor Green should have just refined them not long ago. It was obvious that Professor Green had the idea of accepting Lin En as his disciple long before this class started. Lin En took the 3 gifts with some emotion and solemnly put them into the canvas bag hanging on her waist. "Thank you, teacher. However, teacher, the effect of your magic forbidden scepter seems to have far exceeded that of the magic forbidden bracelet. Is it your final work?" Lin thanked Professor Green first, and then asked. Professor Green nodded. He looked at the magic forbidden scepter with a somewhat lonely look. He only heard him say, "Yes, I once refined a magic forbidden scepter, but it made me make a big mistake. I thought I would never refine a second magic forbidden staff in this life. But now, I met you, the most talented student I have ever seen. I am willing to refine a magic forbidden staff again, and at the same time I also hope that after you have achieved success in your studies, you can fulfill that regret for me. Perfect the magic forbidden scepter." Professor Green's tone suddenly became solemn, and he said solemnly, "Regret, could it be that something bad happened that caused this magic forbidden scepter to become your regret, teacher?" Lin asked softly. He had a hunch that Professor Green's so-called regret must be related to Rosmerta. It's related to what the lady said about Professor Green's unbearable past. Professor Green lowered his head slightly. He sighed, and the gloominess in his light blue eyes became more intense. "Yes, this is related to an incident that I once encountered. That incident destroyed everything for me. As I just said, this magic forbidden scepter is imperfect because its power to suppress magic is limited and it cannot completely suppress the spell-casting ability of the devil-level wizard. But when I refined it, I didn't realize it. This point, at the time when the Dark Lord Gellert Grindelwald was wreaking havoc on the wizarding world, I thought that my magic forbidden scepter was perfect and could suppress his power. So, I bought 2 firearms from the Muggle world, and together with my wife I searched for traces of the Dark Lord Gellert Grindelwald, and finally found him. I activated the power of the forbidden scepter, but..." Professor Green's eyes showed pain. "The forbidden magic scepter completely blocked the magic power of me and her, but it failed to completely block the magical power of the Demon King-level wizard. Grindelwald, who has the ability to cast spells, is far beyond what small Muggle firearms can handle. This act of tying ourselves up makes us lose the ability to resist. I thought I would stay there forever, but she, my wife, used an ancient emotional magic to briefly break through the restrictions of the magic scepter at the cost of her own life, bringing her with her. Then I apparated away from there. Because of my arrogance and recklessness, I lost her forever." Professor Green scratched his hair in pain, as if he had returned to that battlefield. So, it has become my ultimate obsession to completely perfect the magic scepter so that it can truly ban all magic and achieve equality for all living beings. I know she can't come back, but I don't want her sacrifice to go to waste. What if you can perfect the magic forbidden scepter and give it real value, then even if I have to die, I am willing. Professor Green roared, his eyes flashing with the madness that belongs only to a scholar. However, I am old and I have lost the ability to make progress, so my student, that is, you, Lin, will complete my final work for me. Lin, you will do your best to perfect this work in the future. Piece of work. Professor Green's eyes were fixed on Lin. Looking at Professor Green, who seemed to be going crazy, Lin remembered everything he saw at the Three Broomsticks bar last Sunday. He nodded and said, I do, teacher, I will do my best, I promise. Looking at Lin's still immature face, Professor Green sighed and said, I'm sorry, Lin, I made you laugh today. I don't know if it's appropriate for you to accept this responsibility so early, but I have no choice. Lin interrupted Professor Green and said, Teacher, this is my choice. Besides, I am indeed interested in the research of the forbidden magic stone. Professor Green was silent. He glanced at Lin, then stood up and waved his wand twice. A cleansing spell cast silently was thrown upon himself, making Professor Green's appearance tidy again. A book not far away turned into a blackboard under the influence of the transfiguration technique, and lines appeared on the blackboard, eventually forming a pattern that resembled a circuit diagram. Although you chose to practice both formation and formation, legal alchemy has higher requirements for wizard magic. I will start teaching you next year, and now, I will teach you to learn formation alchemy. Professor Green said, Array. It is an alchemy technique that requires the alchemist to combine scattered alchemical runes with magic power to form a specific alchemical array. And this alchemical array is actually similar to the circuit diagrams of muggles. Oh, sorry, I forgot that you probably don't know what a circuit diagram is. After all, not everyone is like me and will go to a muggle university for 2.5 years to study. Professor Green seemed to have remembered something, and he laughed to himself. Although he wanted to learn more knowledge, according to the generally conservative concepts in the wizarding world, it was a shameful thing for wizards and muggles to live together. Hearing this, Lin En shook his head and interrupted, No, teacher, I know what a circuit diagram is. As he spoke, Lin En pointed at the circuit diagram on the blackboard under Professor Green's surprised gaze and said, This is a schematic diagram, which is a circuit diagram used to reflect the working principle of an electronic circuit. It includes power supplies, switches and components, and other basic circuit structures, and there are two different connection methods, series and parallel. Lin didn't study at a Muggle university in this life, but how could he have been taught this in the 9-year compulsory education in his previous life? Now that you understand the circuit diagram, it's easy to handle. You only need to understand the energy source of the alchemy array as a power source, the rune hub of the alchemy array as a switch, and then understand the various alchemy runes as electrons components, then the alchemy circle will not be difficult for you. Professor Green said very happily. It is often very difficult for formation alchemists to teach their disciples, because unlike legal alchemy, which is more about practice than theory, formation alchemy is hellishly difficult in terms of theoretical knowledge. Many talented alchemy apprentices or after being exposed to array-type alchemy, they all complained incessantly. Especially the alchemy knowledge related to alchemy arrays. There are thousands of forms of alchemy arrays alone. These ordinary array alchemists can only memorize them by rote. But Professor Green and Lin are different. After they can successfully understand the alchemical array as a circuit diagram in Muggle theory, the alchemical array in their eyes no longer has thousands of forms, but only the two series and parallel connections. This is a basic form, because other forms of alchemy circles can be arranged and combined in different ways in series and parallel. After telling Lin En the basic principles of the alchemy circle, Professor Green talked about the method of engraving the alchemy circle. The engraving of the alchemy circle is not accomplished by simply carving patterns on the object, but requires the use of a special alchemical engraving knife to completely and permanently engrave the alchemist's magic power on the object. A closed alchemy circuit is formed to allow the magic power to circulate in the alchemy circle. Only in this way can the engraving of the alchemy circle be completed. Professor Green took out a golden carving knife from his pocket while explaining the method. Every alchemist will have a carving knife of his own, but for now, you can use my carving knife to carve. Professor Green handed the carving knife to Lin and said. Lin En carefully took the carving knife. It was a pure gold carving knife. The carving knife seemed to be engraved with hundreds of dense alchemical circuits. These alchemical circuits formed dozens of different alchemical formations. Each alchemy circle on this golden carving knife is only the size of a fingernail, which shows how difficult it is to manufacture this golden carving knife. Professor Green used his wand to outline two strange runes in the air. He said, "These two runes represent the energy source and the rune hub respectively, which are the power supply and switch in the circuit diagram. According to what I said before method, combined with the alchemy runes you have learned, I want you to complete an alchemy in front of me. You can enchant any object, except your wand." Lin nodded. He hesitated, and finally pulled out a large dung bomb from his trouser pocket. It was given to Zonko by the twin Weasleys after they bought it at Joke Shop. "Big dung bomb. I just hope you don't make my office a mess." Professor Green was a little surprised at first, and then said helplessly. Lin hastened to ensure that he would not let the dung bomb explode. Lin sat down at Professor Green's desk, and he carefully looked at the dung bomb in his hand. The shell of this dung bomb is not too thick, so Lin must be careful when carving the alchemy circle, otherwise once the shell of the dung bomb is pierced, Lin can imagine Professor Green hanging himself up hit the screen. This dung bomb itself is an alchemical product, but except for the trigger switch, the other alchemical arrays are hidden under the shell. This allows Lin to not worry about it when carving a new alchemical array. Destroy the original alchemy circle of the dung bomb. Lin carefully used a golden carving knife to carve an energy source symbol into the shell of the dung bomb. When he was carving the runes, he could feel that the golden carving knife was absorbing his own magic power. When the golden carving knife cuts through the shell of the dung bomb, the magic power is released from the tip of the golden carving knife, and finally is deeply engraved into the shell of the dung bomb, forming magical runes. After carving the energy source symbol, Lin carved a rune hub on the original trigger switch of the dung bomb, so that the rune hub and the trigger switch coincided. In this way, Lin could trigger the dung bomb and simultaneously make the alchemy circle takes effect. After completing these two strokes, Lin stopped and rested his chin on his palm to think. After a while, he engraved alchemical runes representing strengthening and diffusion on the shell of the dung bomb. These two alchemical runes can strengthen the power of the dung bomb and reduce the stench after the dung bomb explodes. The area covered spreads to twice the original size. After completing the engraving of the two alchemical runes, Lin En quickly waved the golden carving knife to connect the two alchemical runes with the energy source and the rune hub to form a closed circuit and become an effective alchemy magic circle. In this way, Lin En's first alchemy work, the improved dung bomb, is done. "Teacher, I'm done." Lin En put down the carving knife, raised the dung bomb and said. Professor Green came over, bent down, carefully observed the alchemy circle engraved by Lin, then spread his hands, and said, "In my opinion, the alchemy circle you engraved has reached an excellent level. It is normal next. I will ask you to activate the alchemy circle and experiment with the effects of alchemy products in order to practice true knowledge. But for now, forget it." He didn't want the stench of dung bombs filling his office. "That's it for today, you go back first. From now on, you will come here every Saturday to practice the engraving of the alchemy circle. Of course, don't bring any more dung bombs with you," Professor Green said to Lin. Lin En sneered twice. He didn't want to, but the only things on his body suitable for engraving alchemy circles were these big dung bombs. Although clothes can also be used to engrave defensive alchemy formations, he has not yet started learning defensive alchemy runes. He can't engrave explosion runes on his clothes, right? That's really like going to the toilet with a lantern, you're looking for death. After leaving the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor's office, Lin went to find Fred and George and gave them the improved dung bombs he made. Looking at the two people's ecstatic expressions, Lin En suddenly doubted whether what he did was right or wrong. He couldn't help but mourn in his heart for the victims of this improved dung bomb. In fact, Lin's worry was not without reason. Early the next morning, Lin heard from Erwin Foley that Mr. Filch was hit in the face with a dung bomb and he still smelled. In the next few weeks, Lin repeated the process of learning alchemy runes, went to the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor's office on Saturdays to engrave the alchemy circle, and refined the process of alchemy under the guidance of Professor Green. During this period, Lin N's progress in alchemy can be described as rapid, and the wizard robes and accessories on his body have become alchemical products engraved with the alchemy circle. There are more than a dozen different defensive alchemy circles on his wizard robe, which can make him immune to all Auror-level wizards' disarming spells and other magic spells, and can also be immune to the black magic of ordinary adult wizards. The strength of these defensive alchemy circles is related to Lin's own strength. When the magic power in Lin's body grows with his age, the power of the alchemy circles he made will also increase accordingly. Soon, the day of Halloween arrived. When the little wizards wake up in the morning, they can smell a sweet and tempting smell of roasted pumpkins in the corridor. Numerous pumpkins are decorated all over the Hogwarts castle, making the festive atmosphere of Halloween even more intense. On this beautiful Halloween day, the Weasley twins proposed throwing a dung bomb in the Great Hall, but Lin tried to stop them. Please, even Professor Flitwick has to spend some effort to remove the dung bomb in your hands. Don't you have any self-knowledge? Lin snatched the dung bomb from the two of them, and the expression on his face, the expression should be as helpless as possible. As early as the second day after Lin learned to engrave the alchemy circle, he taught the Weasley twins the method of improving the dung bomb. Although the Weasley twins didn't know the principle, they would still follow the gourd of. After making a simple carving knife, Fred and George stored dozens of improved dung bombs during this time. If these big dung bombs were really dropped in the auditorium, it is conceivable that Gryffindor's house points would definitely be greatly reduced. Although Lin was from Slytherin College, they were his friends after all, and he didn't want them to be hanged and beaten by Professor McGonagall. All right, you convinced us, Fred and George shrugged and said. At the Halloween dinner, 1,000 bats fluttered across the walls and ceiling of the auditorium, and 1,000 more hovered over the dining table like low clouds, making the candle flames flicker in the pumpkin belly. Countless delicacies suddenly appeared on golden plates, and their richness was comparable to that of the opening dinner. Faced with such a feast, even Lin, who has a small appetite, couldn't help eating a big bowl. After the dinner was over, the little wizards dispersed one after another, and the professors on the stage also left one after another. Just as Lin was about to return to the dormitory, and when he had time to memorize a few more alchemy runes, he suddenly found that Professor Green, who was leaving the table, seemed to have something wrong. He could see that there was something wrong in Professor Green's light blue eyes. Contains murderous intent. Moreover, the direction Professor Green left was not his Defense Against the Dark Arts professor's office. I saw Professor Green heading towards the gate of Hogwarts Castle, and after exchanging a few words with Filch, he left the castle, and the direction he left seemed to be Hogsmeade Village. Fred, George, wait. Something seems wrong with Professor Green. Lin grabbed the collars of Fred and George, who were about to leave, and said solemnly. He has never seen murderous intent in the eyes of the always kind Professor Green. Obviously, Professor Green must have encountered some difficulties. Lin told the Weasley twins about his analysis, and said to the two, I plan to go to Hogsmeade Village one step ahead of time through the one-eyed witch statue to see if I can help Professor Green. In addition, my trip there will be danger. If I don't come back within an hour, you guys will report the matter to Professor Dumbledore or Professor McGonagall immediately. Lin was not blindly arrogant in wanting to help, but was confident. First of all, during this period of training, he has been able to complete the wandless casting of the flame curse while chanting the spell aloud, and he can also complete the silent casting of other spells similar to the disarming curse, comparable to some new aurors. Secondly, the equipment on Lin's body contains a large number of alchemy circles, which allows Lin to last for at least an hour even if he encounters a powerful dark wizard, and his request to the Weasley twins is his last backhand. If Professor Dumbledore or Professor McGonagall can come to support, then even if Voldemort comes in person, he may not be able to kill Lin immediately. Hearing this, Fred and George looked at each other. No problem, as long as you can come back safely, it doesn't matter even if the secret passage is exposed. George spoke. The two didn't propose to go with Lin. They were self-aware of their own strength. When Lin had learned the skills of silently casting spells such as the disarming curse, they could only barely release the disarming curse and other magic spells. If they really go, they can only hold Lin back. After warning the two of them, Lin quickly came to the statue of the one-eyed witch. Separate left and right. Lin cast a spell to open the secret passage, passed through the secret passage as quickly as possible, and came to Honeyduke's cellar. Lin raised his wand and cast a disillusionment spell on himself. Lin learned the disguise charm from Professor Green a week ago. The ability to become invisible greatly improved Lin's self-protection ability. Lin only felt a stream of cold liquid flowing down from the top of his head and spreading all over his body. He raised his hand, only to find that his body was completely invisible. Lin quickly climbed out of the cellar and away from Honeyduke's. Hogsmeade is the largest wizarding village in the British wizarding world. If a battle really takes place, the location of the battle must not be inside Hogsmeade. From this point of view, the final location is clear, then it's the entrance to Hogsmeade. Lin walked towards the entrance of Hogsmeade under the disillusionment curse. After turning a corner, the entrance to Hogsmeade Village appeared in his field of vision, but at the same time, the entrance to Hogsmeade Village appeared in his field of vision, and a black-robed wizard with his mouth and nose covered. Seeing this black-robed wizard, Lin En's heart rang with alarm. Even though he was nearly 100 meters away from him, Lin En didn't dare to make any more moves. He stood motionless, staring at the opponent's feet instead of staring at the opponent. If this black-robed wizard is really a powerful black wizard, then the other party must have the ability to detect the phantom spell, so approaching the other party rashly is definitely not a rational choice, and powerful wizards can generally detect he was aware of his gaze, which was why Lin En didn't dare to look directly at the other person. This knowledge was taught to him by Professor Green, and he benefited a lot from Professor Green's personal experience. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.